Matthew, are you logged in to
Oh
PrimeGov?
my God, look at him.
Okay,
He's here.
I see you.
Do you see his picture? He's in this chair. You are a mess. Well, he was flying over the sugar mill earlier. Now
Oh,
he's
he
sitting-
took a picture. I looked and I didn't see you, but I was a little concerned.
I don't know, about 5 minutes will be.
Exactly. I'm gonna start without her.
Yeah, it's the same. Yeah.
Oh,
He
you're
took-
right.
He took the picture and put it as his background.
It's gonna be confusing.
Because she's not here.
She's not here yet.
To screenshot.
Is,
Otherwise, you'd be sitting on your lap.
Yeah, wait till Diane gets here.
okay,
Oh, he's gonna take a picture of the picture?
yes.
No, where Matthew sits.
There
Oh.
you go. That way he could just do that. Yes, there we
He's,
go.
he's taking a picture of your normal seat so that you can, oh, man.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I would now like to call the August 5th, 2025 Longmont City Council Study Session to order. The live stream of this meeting can be viewed at the city's YouTube channel. It can also be viewed at Longmont Public Media /watch or on Comcast channels 8 or 880. As a reminder, Matthew Popkin is going to be, it looks like he's here, but actually he's on Zoom and we allowed him 3 meetings earlier that he could do on Zoom, and this is his third. So I don't know, it looks kind of weird there, but okay. Yeah, we expect you to stand up. May we have a roll call, please, Michelle?
Yes, Mayor Peck.
Present.
Councilmember Christ. Councilmember Hidalgo-Faring. Here. Councilmember McCoy. Present. Councilmember Popkin.
Present.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
And Councilmember Yarborough. Here. Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm sorry.
Anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chamber. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. And we have 3 minutes, and I would like you to put your, say your name, and you have 3 minutes. And I would like to say that Councilor Christ has entered the room. Do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to future agendas? Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo-Faring.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we've all received some requests around the ranked choice voting. I would like to make a motion to add to a future agenda item to actually hold a study session to discuss more for an educational purpose for us. Hopefully have somebody from the county come in and present, as well as the ranked choice voting Longmont group, or someone from a representative to explain the process. May I have a second so I could speak to the motion? Thank you.
So that's been moved by Mayor Pro Tem Susie Hidalgo-Faring to put ranked choice voting on a future agenda study session, and that was seconded by Councilor Yarborough.
Okay, thank you. And the reason why I'm bringing it up so early is to allow for a robust discussion and educational opportunity for the public. This is a huge shift, and I don't think this decision should be made lightly or without sufficient background knowledge. So in looking at our schedule for the next couple of months, I know we have budget, so it's not really going to be happening anytime soon. But, you know, if we can look at something in the beginning of the next year.
I think that's a good idea because it is a huge topic and it needs a lot of education. It's not something we should just throw on a ballot. So I will, are there any more discussion? Seeing none, let's vote.
Mayor, so I can just be clear, what I hear is that's after the first of the year.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Yes. And that passes 5-2 with Councilor Christ and Councilor McCoy in opposition. I have a couple of motions I want to make, but I want to explain them before because it's going to be about getting some money out of our contingency fund, and I would like council to decide how much, or even if they want to give, with a very short sentence. The first one, there are 2 entities. It's the TLC Learning Center is one of them, and El Comité is the next. Matt Aldred from TLC has emailed all of us about what his needs are. And just as an explanation, CCAP is a program for children, babies, basically from about 3 months to 18 or 2 years, 18 months to 2 years, that uses a program called CCAP, which gives vouchers to families for daycare so that they can afford to put their children in daycare. And I've had about 3 conversations with Matt about this. Usually the county is the one that funds CCAP, and they put a hold on that for 2025. And daycare centers have really been suffering. There's about 700 babies, according to Matt, that have not been able to put their children into daycare because they just can't afford it, and those vouchers are not available. That is a problem for our city as well, because if it is a two-family household, two earners in a household, and maternity leave is older and they cannot find daycare or pay for it, then we lose an income and people start falling below the line, excuse me, the place where they can't afford to even make rent. So what Matt is asking for is $75,000 through the end of the year. And this is what I want council to decide. First of all, in a very short statement, we'll go around and say, do you think we should fund it, and what amount? The reason I'm bringing this up also is that I want to make one decision and make a motion on that one and then go to the next one. We have $116,485 in our contingency fund, and $75,000 is going to bring it pretty low. So, anybody have any ideas on what you think they should get, so I can make a motion? I don't want to make a motion without a dollar amount in it. So, Counselor Christ.
I would like to see what that $75,000 is going to be used for in terms of their budget. It wasn't clear to me how that was all going to be spent, and
It's going directly on
it's a direct subsidy. I
childcare
think.
for babies. According to TLC, he did not have any babies at all that were able to get childcare. He has a huge waiting list.
He has a waiting list for
For-
babies looking for childcare.
Well, their parents,
Yeah,
yes.
but no funds to.
No, he's out of funds.
Okay.
So he's asking if we can help out to the end of the year. It's one-time funding. So is there any other? Counselor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So I don't want to set an unreasonable precedent with this, and I'm pretty confident that our council contingency, if we didn't have the rollover, we wouldn't have $116,000.
No.
And so what generally is on average our rollover from, or not our rollover, but our allocation in the budget?
I see Teresa.
Teresa, is it 60,000? It's 60,000.
Okay, thank you. So
Okay.
that would exceed our general yearly allocation, which I think is problematic if we're going to be setting a precedent. I would hope that we would also be flexible in allowing that there's also funds available within the 60,000 yearly allocation for multiple council contingency concerns. So I don't think that we've allocated anything much beyond 20,000 for any specific organization in a council contingency allocation. I could be wrong on that number, but I don't feel like I remember any from my days that were over 20,000.
I think the only time we may have gone over 25-ish was when we had a significant year with West Nile virus and we were needing to put more money into spraying. And I'm vaguely thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 40.
Okay,
Does that sound
I
about right,
do not
Teresa?
remember that from my time.
No, that was before you,
Yeah,
actually.
okay, yes, so,
So we did 30,000 earlier this year for the library lockers.
So the library lockers are the highest at 30,000 this year.
So I
I
would,
think the highest has been city items where we've seen that.
right. So I really would be hestant.
For LEDP, because they lost the.
What would you be comfortable?
I'd be hesitant to go any higher than 30,000 because that's half of the yearly allocation. So I'd prefer something below 30,000 if we're going to, make that kind of allocation to a non-city related issue. While it does affect the city, obviously, it's not
Yeah, do you remember?
specifically a city department or something along those lines. So
Okay, I agree. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, Hidalgo Fearing.
So, thank you. I would be comfortable with doing 25,000, and I would support this because it's also aligned with our council priorities of early childhood care and education. So I think yeah. To say more.
Councilor Yarbrough, would you turn on your mic again? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I know we're talking about human beings here, and
Absolutely.
if we spend $30,000 on some lockers, I think we should spend $30,000 on some infants. So that's me. I would go 30.
Councilor McGuire.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Well, I was going to agree with Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferrin and also cite our council priorities. And I think you make an excellent point there, Councilmember Yarborough. But I think we're coming in and giving at least a third of what they're really asking for. And I think that's a third is better than that. And I would agree. I hear exactly what Councilmember Rodriguez is saying in regards to the average, and we don't want to, be generous to the fault where we then can't help in the future if they need it to at least the same level. So 25,000 would be where I would be at.
Okay, and remember that we do have a partnership with TLC for employee childcare as well.
We do, and council, just to make you aware, we're seeing another early childhood group in town that may be in the same position, so it's Wild Plum. So just make you aware of there may be another one in the same position.
Okay, Councilor Popkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Peck. I had a question here. If we've ever done, I guess instead of a lump sum, can it be like conditioned as like a revolving loan fund that we could actually like use this as seed funding for TLC to basically like kickstart something that would be paid back even with zero interest over a certain period of time. So it actually is an investment as a different vehicle here, so that 30,000 or 25,000, whatever number we settle on, can actually go further long term. I don't know if we can. Again, this is the first time I'm hearing this level of allocation for this kind of a purpose. But since it's, I'm just wondering if we can condition it and give TLC some flexibility on how they want to administer it, but actually use it as like a seed fund to get them going longer term than just kind of a one-time lump sum. Just asking out of curiosity. I don't know the feasibility or practicality of that, but I always like to think about how it can make our dollars go as far as possible.
I'd like to remind council that this is actually the function of our county commissioners, and they are the ones that cut the program this year, which is putting our child care facilities in a bad spot. I am hoping that in their next year's budget, they think of what they are doing, to be honest, and who it's
Well,
going to affect.
This wouldn't be just to be clear of what a revolving loan fund in this context would be. It wouldn't be that we continuously provide 30,000 annually from this fund. It would be a contingency one time, but we
No.
ask that they administer it as a revolving fund so that it does get paid back over time and then can be reinvested in future infants. If that's not feasible, then I'm not going to push that, but I just wanted to ask if that was a possibility.
From my perspective, no, it is not. How about the rest of council? And this is not the way this fund has been set up. It's not, we're not a bank. Yeah, it's not ongoing. They're one-time funds. So with all of this, I am going to move that we, from our contingency fund, allocate 25,000 to the TLC for early child care. for the rest of the year 2025. Counselor Popkin, you still have your hand's still up.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. I wasn't suggesting a revolving recurring contribution from the council contingency, to be clear. A revolving loan fund I was just asking if a one-time basically seed fund could be provided to TLC for this purpose. We don't administer like a bank. We wouldn't be the bank here. We would give them basically a grant, which this is in effect, and then they would operate it as a revolving fund that as they give it out to families, the families pay it back over a certain timeline without like interest. So it's still much more affordable, but it could then be reinvested as it gets reaccumulated over time for future families. It wouldn't involve council at that point. It wouldn't involve a second-year contribution, a third-year commitment. It wouldn't involve any of that. It would just be putting that $30,000 to a long-term but revolving use. That's what I was inquiring about, just as from a clarification.
You're talking about how it should be administered, correctly? And
Yeah.
that is up to the TLC as a business nonprofit. It is not up to council.
Okay, I was just asking if we could condition it upon something like that. Anyway, thank you.
So do I have a second? Okay, so Councilor McCoy seconded to approve $25,000 for TLC for early childhood education. Let's vote. And that passes 6-1 with Councilor Christ in opposition. So the next one I had, and I'm sorry this is taking so long, is that El Comité. We have a contract with El Comité. It's a yearly contract. It will be over, it'll be renewed or looked at again at the end of the year. They are short on operating funds because of all the business that they're doing lately. So I would like to be able to give them something to carry them through the end of the year. And once again, it's the same discussion with $25,000 coming out of the 116. What does that leave us really fast? 66,000. Let me know what you think. Should we do this? Should we not? And if
More
so,
than
how much?
66.
I should ask Teresa.
91,000 after the 25, correct, Teresa? So they had 116 to start with?
Yeah. It should be 66, yeah. 50, because you said 25, right?
Because the agenda is 116.
No,
So Teresa's verifying whether the 116, because you've had some other contributions, she's showing 101,000. So 91, 81, 80,000 would be left. Wait, or 70. What's in?
It's 116.
It's 116?
Yes. 116,486.
So I'm doing change here.
You're doing
I'm not doing the 486. So you have about 91,486 left after the 25, correct? Yep.
Okay. So once again, do you think we should do this? And if so, how much?
What was the ask?
There was no specific ask.
No.
Yeah, it would have been. She does have a GoFundMe out for dollars. They're really hurting. Oh, Counselor McCoy?
Well, again, I think, having looked at this as well, I think $25,000 would probably at least be a good start and would encourage others, if she does have a GoFundMe, to support that. So, and see that the city's serious about it too. That would bring our contingency fund, to about 66,000, with about a little less than half a year to go. So, keeping that in mind. But I think the need is there at 25,000.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferry.
Thank you, Mayor. So so I work at a Title I school. This group has a constant presence with our families, with our children, and not just in our building, but in several buildings throughout Longmont. And they've been a vital network and a source of resource for residents. They've helped with getting kids out of, and families who were living in vans in parking lots and getting them into housing. So I would agree with Councilmember McCoy. You said 25,000. I would agree in supporting this group. They leased the space from us, they've connected very closely and worked closely with public safety and other departments, children's, youth, and families, as well as neighborhood and community resources. So they've actually also become an integral part of the work that we're trying to accomplish as well, and that partnership. So that's what I propose.
Councilor Christ. What?
And Popkin is on. He was on.
One of the reasons why this is so difficult is because we can't see the whole arena. We know that all of our nonprofits are in trouble to some degree. We talked about we're going to have a rotating schedule with the nonprofits because we don't have enough funding for everybody every year. And so to kind of jump the line and ask us directly for council contingency, it's hard to say how much should go to each group without knowing who else might be short this year. And also with our new process, seeing how that will work out and who would be like next in line this year or, in next year in 2026 to get and apply for funding for 2026. So it's just I'm not saying there isn't a need, and I'm not saying that they aren't worthy. I'm just saying that I want to follow our process and to see the whole arena.
Councilor Popkin.
Yeah, I'll just say ditto to Councilmember Christ's question there on the process and the cycle here. Like, is this something we should, is the direct channel here the vehicle, or is it through the Housing and Human Services process as a supplement? I just want to know, like, kind of how has council done this in the past? That was question one for whomever wants to speak to that. And then the second question was, I think if I heard Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferrin correctly, that this was fitting into the council priorities for housing and safety in particular. But I just wanted to get clarity if that's aligned there, just as we had that same conversation before with TLC and the early childhood education priorities for council. I just wanted to make sure that this is fully aligned there with our priorities as well.
Okay, Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with what everyone has said. I know El Comité is doing so much in the community, and they're definitely needed. And then I also agree with Councilor Chris as well. Usually, our nonprofits go through our Housing and Human Services and apply for grants, and that's where when they apply for the grants, then that committee actually has a like a rubric, and they have a system in what they do and how they determine how much each nonprofit gets. So, what comes to mind with this, especially now that, Harold has said that Wild Plum also may be in the same situation. And usually we don't get these requests like this, especially for this amount of money. So we know that there's a need with all nonprofits. But what comes to mind when I think about when the Marshall fires happened, and council, and I think it was Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring said, you know, wanted to give 20,000 to help, you know, Louisville. And we still have to, and that happened at the end of the year. So I guess I just want to make sure that we are mindful if, you know, if we do give. I also want to give, and I know there's a need, but I also want to be mindful that if any emergencies happen and we need to distribute, or, you know, we have the desire, I wish I could give money to everybody, even, not even Counselor Yarbrough, but Shakita Yarbrough.
Yes.
But we're not able to, you know, we can't give everybody money all the time. And so we are limited. So, I mean, I'm kind of torn. I think 25,000 is too much for me personally. It's not too much. I wish we can give them 50,000. But thinking about the unknowns until the end of the year, and if something comes up, are we going to have enough to support or help someone else that a one time? And I get what Councilor Popkin is also stating, like maybe there in the future there could be a process, but Housing and Human Services really is the process. This is just a request for organizations who are hurting right now, and they look to their government to say, hey, can you support us for this one time opportunity? So I think 25 is a little, if we can go under 25.
You know, it's whatever. They came to me.
Yeah.
And that's usually the way these requests come. Someone from council knows about it, either because you like Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring is the library liaison, so she understood what was happening. And so if someone comes to you,
Right,
there's no really any place to send them.
right.
They're just asking from their representatives, can you help us out?
Absolutely.
So we don't have a list of priorities. We don't, unless someone comes and asks, we don't know what situation they're in. So it isn't, I don't have any skin in this game as far as whatever this council wants to do, and that's what I'm asking. So
Okay.
Counselor Yarbrough says under 25, would 20 or less?
15, would that
15,
work?
okay. Are there any other? Okay. All right. I am going to move to, out of our contingency fund, to give El Comité operating dollars, one-time operating dollars through the end of 2025. I'm sorry, $15,000 out of our contingency fund, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. And that passes 6-1 with Councilor Christ in opposing. Thank you very, very much for giving this time. We are now at public.
Mayor, can I jump in and give you all some talking points in case
Please
somebody
do.
asks?
Yes.
Because we often hear, well, our budget is, you know, so big, what can we do? So obviously, the enterprise funds have very specific limitations on what those funds can be used for. So outside of council contingency, it really is a general fund that's available for that. I've mentioned to you all, next year is a tight budget year.
Right.
It's looking tight this year. And so where we're currently sitting as of May, I'm eagerly awaiting this month's sales and use tax numbers. Last month, we were 2.2% above on sales tax. You all saw this, 19% behind on use tax. Use tax is really the headwind for, frankly, every city right now. So we're 0.9% behind where we were last year. So there's, Teresa helped me, 2.8% overall. I mean, the margins aren't that bad, but the margins can get away from us if we're not watching it closely. So you all know we're watching revenue and expenditures pretty close. I've talked to folks about, depending on what this number looks like, we may start making some expenditure adjustments. So if people ask you, well, what's in the general fund budget as a whole for this? like many cities, we're incredibly tight. Fortunately, at this point, we haven't had to make some of the drastic decisions that other cities have had to make. And you've seen Boulder, they've eliminated the part-time temp positions. They're, I think, talking about furloughs. Sandy sent me something that I think on August 18th, Denver is eliminating positions and doing a reduction in force. So when we say this, there's broader issues that we're dealing with as communities across Colorado. Right now, we're not in that position, but we're watching it pretty close, because if this trend continues, then we're going to have to take some other actions. The thing that we have is we've been building the stability reserve for this very issue. It's a reserve on top of what we've normally set for this type of condition. And so we're watching that very close too. People are saying, why? I was literally in some conversations with businesses earlier. It really is the broader macroeconomic uncertainty as to why they're not pulling triggers. When we think about projects that are ready to go, those that have spent a lot of money or have capital investors in play typically are moving forward. Some aren't. And almost everyone I'm talking to, it's the uncertainty in the macroeconomics. And so just know that's kind of what's pushing the use tax for us.
And I, just on top of that, I have to say that because of the way our CFO at the time did our reserves, is why we came through the pandemic so well, when other cities did not. So I thank you for that. Councilor Popkin, I see your hand is still up.
Yeah, I was waiting for, I had two items to direct the city manager, and I. before we moved on.
Okay.
Yep.
Councilor Popkin, go for it.
Yeah, these should be relatively quickly. I had one clarifying question for Harold first. Harold, am I correct in remembering, we're looking at the open space conversation that we've been having over the last couple months. And if I'm correct from our meeting in, I think it was June, council directed the city to purchase the Bigelow property. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I just wanted to clarify, has that been purchased?
I don't know if we've closed on it yet. Have we? We have not closed on it yet. So we're moving forward
Okay.
for the
If I wanted to
acquisition. We haven't
direct,
closed on it.
would it be appropriate?
Go ahead, Matthew.
Sorry, say that one more.
Council's directed us to purchase it. We haven't closed on the property yet.
Noted, thank you. So I guess I'll make the motion, and if it's more appropriate to do it after we've closed, I'm okay withholding it again. But I wanted to motion to direct the city to operate the Bigelow property once acquired as open space. My understanding is that that was the intention, that it would be kind of this buffer to some of the other sites in the area as well, and kind of add on to the broader river corridor, and just wanted to bring that forward and offer that direction if that's appropriate at this stage.
Do we have a second on that one? Not yet, but can I ask a question? Is this an appropriate motion while we're still going through negotiations?
I think we're actually done with negotiating. We're just moving into closure.
I'm sorry, I didn't state that correctly. Negotiations on the Wholesome and that whole area, is that necessary to be finished with those negotiations?
Probably actually, because of the funds. Well, I'm thinking through this on the fly. I think council could direct us, if council chose to do this. One of the slides that I presented to you all when we went over this in the public session was that council can direct the use of the land. And so I think that was something that we said is a question for council. You could direct us to do it based on that question, and if there's a change, we would have to bring it back to you based on negotiations and what that looks like, or we may have to do some accounting adjustments.
Okay. I'll second that then, and knowing that the motion may not go through, but we can bring it back for discussion. Does that make,
Yeah, because we'll
I
have to
think that
put
would-
something,
yeah.
what you're doing is directing us to place something on the agenda. So we would
Exactly.
bring something to put on the agenda to direct the land use so that it's posted at the time, so that lets us work through some of those things.
okay. Do you, Counselor Popkin, do you have a timeline that you want that to come back? Or remembering that we're going through an election, so. And budget. Or should we just,
He doesn't know.
I'm sorry, what?
He's never gone through budget, he doesn't know, that's why.
Yeah, budget's going to be interesting. So do you just want it to leave it up to staff to throw it on an agenda that is appropriate for them? Because budget's going to take quite a
Yeah,
bit of time.
I'm okay with that.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
and
guess
honest-
I'm okay with that. I don't, meet.
okay, all right. So Counselor Popkin made a motion to direct staff to operate Bigelow as open space once it's acquired, and I seconded that motion. Let's vote. And that passes 6-1 with Counselor Christ opposing. Counselor Popkin, did you have another one?
I did.
Okay.
One more here. So the other, still related to the open space topic, we heard a lot at the public forum and over multiple public comment periods about kind of what's the net benefit and how that's defined in this open space disposition process. And I think that led to some confusion and different interpretations and a range of different things. My motion here was to direct, I was going to propose, and I'm open to council comments and feedback on this, but I was going to propose that we ask PRAB, the Planning and Zoning Commission, the Sustainability Advisory Board, to advise council on how we should consider defining net benefit or clarifying net benefit for future considerations, if any, on the open space, on the disposition of open space.
Okay, it's been moved by Counselor Popkin that we put on a future agenda to direct PRAB, our Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, to define net benefits to the open space conversation as far as the distal toll. Am I correct in that?
I just, I wanted to clarify two parts. One, I was thinking more than just PRAB here. I was thinking PRAB, Planning and Zoning, and Sustainability Advisory Board. So we have multiple perspectives from different backgrounds that can inform a broader conversation on what's kind of an intersection of
Okay.
open space, sustainability, and land use.
Okay.
And then the other clarifying is this is not related to distal toll specifically. This is more broadly on just how we define net benefit in general for the disposition of open space in general.
So this is, okay, I'm going to change it and leave distal toll out to open space, period. Okay. So let me see if I can state this correctly again. Counselor Popkin moved that we direct staff to open up a conversation on what the net benefit is for open space dispensation, and open it up to the Sustainability Board, to the Parks and Recreation Board, to Planning and Zoning, to have a future conversation on what the net benefit is for open space dispensation. Is that correct? Woo. And I seconded that.
Yes.
I think I did. Did I? I don't know.
Yeah, you did.
It's on there now. Okay, so this one was Michelle, it's Sean McCoy seconded this. Okay, let's vote.
They'll come after you.
And that passes 6-1 with Counselor Christ opposing. And now we are at public invited to be heard. And we have on the first person on our list is Sharon O'Leary. And you have 3 minutes. I think it is the low, there you go.
On?
Yeah, got it.
Good evening, Mayor Peck and council members. Sharon O'Leary, 534 Emery Street, co-chair of the Historic East Side Neighborhood. I'm here tonight to thank you for getting the quiet zone started. It can be witnessed with the construction taking place along the railroad tracks. My concern to date is that I fear the city of Longmont is going to permanently close Fifth Avenue at Atwood. I have been here numerous times before requesting that you not close Fifth Avenue. The historic East Side neighborhood is the oldest neighborhood in Longmont. The city of Longmont developed it with the basic grid system, wide open east-west corridors so that horses and carriages could get through. Modern day Longmont was so proud they placed a large bronze plaque on the east side of Main Street showing the original town. Our city leaders knew and practiced the golden rule of transportation. Transportation should connect, not divide. Within the boundaries of our neighborhood, we have 5 east-west corridors: 4th Avenue, 5th Avenue, 6th Avenue, Longs Peak, and 8th Avenue. Since the early 80s, the city of Longmont has not honored the original design and has severely impacted the historic East Side neighborhood. In the 80s, the city closed 8th Avenue in a 2-for-1 trade with the railroad, thus leaving 4 east-west corridors within the neighborhood. Then later, the LDDA decided to create a plaza directly in front of a senior living facility to create a gathering place for downtown events such as the Oktoberfest, and closed off 6th Avenue. Presently, that leaves us with 3 east-west corridors within the neighborhood. Once the city started talking about quiet zones, and the conversation turned to a 2-for-1 deal with the railroad, again, closing off 5th Avenue. The neighborhood was opposed to this decision because it would only leave 2 east-west corridors. The city has increasingly been closing 4th Avenue for downtown events and music. When these programs are happening, we will only have one, again, I say one, east-west corridor open. And that would be Longs Peak, if you permanently close 5th Avenue. Again, transportation should connect, not divide. This is a blatant case of systemic bias. Longmont's oldest neighborhood will have the most diminished access in the majority of the city. The historic East Side neighborhood is a residential, intergenerational neighborhood and not an extension of downtown. We choose to remain that way. By closing off citizens to east-west corridors, you are impairing their ability to transport children to schools, sporting events, access the library and other city amenities, their ability to walk, bike, or drive. What does that mean?
That means your time's up.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh, man, I practiced, and it was way shorter. You guys, if you have $30,000 for lockers, you have $30,000 to keep 5th Avenue open for all citizens. Thank you.
Thank
for
you,
the job
Sharon.
you do.
Ethan Algreen?
It's now week 3, and nothing has been done to save Ozzy Osprey, perched atop a utility pole on city open space. Does anybody care about protecting wildlife? I'm urging the city of Longmont to consult Colorado Parks and Wildlife immediately. This nest poses a real fire, electrocution, and wildlife mortality risk. It endangers not only bird survival, but also public safety. And yet, despite staff acknowledgement of the danger, the city has thus far taken no constructive action. Most concerning of all, the city has yet to consult CPW, whose own published guidelines recommend early engagement in exactly this type of case. Community members are not asking for anything crazy. We simply want the city to follow its own stated bird protection policies and consult the experts. This Osprey family is protected under federal law. CPW has the scientific expertise and regulatory standing to advise on the best path forward. But so far, Longmont is dragging its feet, and that's unacceptable. CPW plays a leadership role in raptor protection across Colorado. Its biologists are trained to assess site-specific situations and develop practical, science-based solutions that balance wildlife needs with modern constraints. Other communities in Colorado face similar situations and acted swiftly to install safe nesting platforms, often in a matter of days. Boulder County, Fort Collins, Loveland have all taken responsible action when wildlife was at risk. There's no excuse for delay. So I'm asking the city tonight, please direct staff to initiate immediate consultation with CPW. Ozzie Osprey is more than a random bird on a pole. He's a symbol of whether Longmont keeps its promise to protect wildlife and manage open space with integrity. Let's not allow red tape to defeat environmental responsibility.
Thank you, Ethan. David Emerson.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Emerson, 1152 Twin Peaks Circle in Longmont, and Executive Director for Habitat for Humanity. So Habitat has long enjoyed the city's support. We have an incredible working relationship with staff, and I'm going to rely on that tonight when I ask you to delay the adjusted maximum sales price for 2025 and allow time for us to absorb the information and also continue to work with staff to understand the assumptions. I think Molly and Christy have done a great job with the packet. There's a lot of information in there to absorb and think about. One of the items that you may have read is Habitat is really the only developer providing affordable for sale product, and of course that's extremely tricky. So what I just wanted to make sure you're aware of is to give an idea of what adopting that 2025 maximum sales price would mean to us as calculated is a 3-bedroom at 60% would go from 262,000 to 203,000, at a 4-bedroom from 284,000 to 224,000, which would be nearly impossible to absorb. At Sugar Mill, we're finishing up there. We have closed on or 2 of the last 6, and we have families for all of those homes. And so really, I think what I'm asking for is time to understand areas we have concerns on. And I know there's a lot of different considerations. I'm looking at it from one point, which is affordability. For example, attached and detached, when I look at affordability, it doesn't really matter much to our, what we're doing, but there's what was a $39,000 approximate gap between attached and detached is now almost $80,000. And also like to understand is attached condos, townhomes. I know there's an effort, very understandably, to simplify things, but the difference in underwriting a condo versus a townhome is obviously, we've done both, and there are considerations there for affordability. So not easy stuff, really. The staff I've already started to work with, Molly and Christy, and I'm sure we can figure it out. But I do think if we adopt it as that formula is now presented, would be problematic, not just for us, but any developer, of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Gary Hodges.
You guys are cruel. You can put it in presentation when you're ready, sir.
Time moves faster when you're up here. Maybe slower for you, but faster for me. All right, Gary Hodges, 2148 Stewart Street. Tonight, I'm finishing my presentation from last week on electric rate increases. All the data I'm showing tonight are from city documents and an open records request I put in. There are some caveats, so without knowing the partitioning, we can't know what portion comes from so-called green energy initiatives. I haven't considered inflation, I haven't considered subscriber growth, and I acknowledge that there are plenty of other caveats out there. My focus here is cost only, and tonight I'm showing the impact of the promised substantial rate increases, and frankly the numbers are staggering. That's why I wore my most festive shirt that I have, because the numbers are kind of grim. So the blue bars in this plot are annual 0, 20, 30 costs collectively borne by ratepayers. We can see in 2024 that's a 6.8% increase. 25 is another 6.8%, and then we're projected to have 6.1% increases through 2030. So we start at around 2 million and end at 16.75 million. So that's the annual cost collectively in the city. The red line is the cumulative reduction to the local economy. So that's if you sum everything up. So that's the right axis. Numbers are in millions. That's huge. So keep in mind also this is residential only. I've done the same exercise for commercial accounts, and it's just as depressing. Taken together, it's 9 digits of cumulative economic reduction to the local economy in 2030. So what does this mean for a family of 4? So this is that difference divided by the number of ratepayers. 4 movies with popcorn and drinks. In 1 year. 12 trips to the rec center, 4 meals at the pump house. Other ways it might be spent: 2 trips to Elix Gardens, 5 Rocky Games, or if you had a child born in 2030 and you put that the extra that you're paying in the 529 for 18 years, you'd be around $2,300. So if you want to know the real numbers, multiply all of those by 41,000. And that gives you an idea about what the collective loss is to the city. So I don't think it's unreasonable to request that the city take a critical look at the impacts of this policy. We've had it for a while. We can see now what it's going to mean. And I just think we could all sit down and have a discussion about this and see if it still makes sense. Maybe the 50 or 60% reduction in CO2 we have now is pretty good, and maybe it's not worth pushing it to try to push it to 0. But like I said, the numbers are staggering. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary. Steve Altshuler.
Good evening. Steve Altshuler, 1555 Taylor Drive. Oh, sorry. Last week, and actually every week is great because we get to exercise our First Amendment rights, although 5 minutes last week was really wonderful. When running for city council, we are told to make a public declaration. Yet when I did that last week, I was accused of grandstanding. Well, we cannot all keep declaring how our father was on city council as if it was some kind of genetic rite of passage. Speaking of fathers, I'd like to tell you about mine. His parents came to America through Ellis Island in 1924 after being fully vetted for health and no criminal record, and had to sign a paper promising to never take 1 cent in government aid. After his father's death, my father often came home from school and found their few sticks of furniture in the front yard as they had been evicted. This would be in the 1930s. He never voiced any animosity against the landlord as the rent hadn't been paid, and they took responsibility for that. My father worked and put himself through college while working full-time to provide for his mother and 4 sisters, and ultimately helped put a man on the moon. Not one of his 3 kids, 7 grandchildren, or 20 great-grandchildren has ever taken 1 cent in government aid. And now I want to move over to Councilman Popkin from last week, talking about homelessness. Mayor Peck, if God reached down and gave you $5 billion and said he wanted you to end homelessness in Longmont and build as many homes as were necessary, that would still never get rid of homelessness in Longmont. Human nature being what it is, you'd have another 10,000 people that would just quit working because they also wanted a free home. Or you'd have people move here from Boulder, you'd have people move here from Connecticut because they all want a free home also. There are things we can do to help reduce homelessness. There is nothing we can do to ever get rid of homelessness altogether. It's human nature. A lot of people will do the bare minimum to get by. What City Council here and all across the nation needs to do is look at ways to help people help themselves. The old adage is, you can give someone a fish and they'll eat for a day. If you teach them to fish, they'll eat for a lifetime. There's a lot of mental problems out there, PTSD, people that need all the help we can give them. There's also a lot of people that are looking to do as little as possible. For 3 years, my wife and daughter and I went down to Boulder and fed homeless people, and it was the same people year after year bragging about how they don't work. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. John Coe.
Thank you. John Coe, 1899 3rd Avenue. In 1997, the county commissioners went through a long process to vacate the property next to my house. And there's a lot of restrictions on that property. It was since annexed into the city, and a lot of those restrictions seem to have gone away and seem to be being nullified by current actions of the owners in that area. The property, there was going to be 14 houses on that property, and it would have been better than what happened there. The house there is recently sold for $2.89 million, and that area is unregulated. I think there needs to be a one-way restriction on that property and some signage in there to further enforce these restrictions that the county spent 3 years in their vacation process. That process started in 1993 as part of a lawsuit to try and get those 14 houses in there. And I think that the 1993 V03 should be brought into the city regulations, and that alleyway should be better regulated. Also, I understand that the mayor is term limited or is not running next year, and I understand that Sarah Levinson has put her hat into the ring, and I think she would be a wonderful mayor. I'd like to endorse her.
This is not a political
Okay, I understand.
stand.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else on the list, I'm going to close public invited to be heard, and we are going to move on to our special reports and presentations. I don't think we have any tonight. So we're going to go on to study session items. The first one is the redevelopment incentives for targeted areas.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you. No problem. Again, Grant Penland, Planning and Development Services Director. I'm joined this evening by Principal Planner Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson, as well as Laura Moody, Redevelopment and Revitalization Manager. And we'll get started here shortly. I'll kick us off. Nope. Sorry about that. You're good.
Wrong one.
Should be.
There we go.
Should be good to go into the. Oh, yeah, that's right. Control L. That helps. There we go. Should be good. Thank you. Control L is magic, we just learned. Again, good evening. I'm going to kick us off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Laura and Jennifer. But as this initial slide indicates, the real intent of this discussion is to just kick off and get some initial feedback from council based upon direction that was provided. The goal is to get that feedback so we can come back at a later date with some specific policy recommendations and or code recommendations. So what we're going to cover this evening generally is what area of focus staff should be working on. So again, that geographic area of focus, I think it's been commonly referred to as urban renewal innovation zones. So we'll look for some input on what that might make sense for council. Then we'll move into building height. Again, we'll kind of go through current standards, which have some parameters that may be worthwhile for consideration. And then, as I mentioned, height options as well as bonuses and compatibility options. And then we'll conclude with other targeted incentives in terms of financial and others. So kicking off with, again, the geographic focus, what you're looking at on this screen is essentially highlighted the sub-area for the sugar factory and steam sub-area plan. Those are shown in kind of the orangish yellow. Also shown is the southwest urban renewal area, and that's highlighted in pink. And again, they're overlaid on this. So in staff looking at these areas and understanding council priorities, we thought it would probably make sense to at least explore this as an initial area of focus. And then jumping into a more granular level, taking into consideration some of the land uses in the area, the existing land use areas. Staff has highlighted the area that we think might make most sense, just again, based upon the geographic nature of the area. And you'll notice that the southern area that includes Dickens Nature Area and the wastewater treatment facility has been excluded, as well as the northern area of Steam. And what we focused on, again, in this corridor, the expanded corridor that's shown is primarily areas that we thought might, again, lend themselves to additional height in this area, particularly because of the topography and also the minimal impacts, or at least perceived minimal impacts to adjacent non-compatible or less compatible land uses. So again, we'll go into a little bit more detail, but again, staff looked at these areas as a potential kickoff. And then looking into the future, there's several areas that I think staff has looked at and council has looked at as in terms of prioritization, but areas for future consideration may be Village at the Peaks, which generally would be the Twin Peaks urban renewal area that on this map is highlighted with a star. Generally the downtown area, which there was some overlap on the last image as well, but that's generally indicated with a red circle. And then the North Main Street corridor, the oval or the blue oval that's shown kind of extends in the area that's kind of midtown up to the North Main Street corridor, but again, that being a potential future area as well. And then there's been dialogue about potential expansion of the urban renewal area into the River District, which is generally indicated here on the screen with the green circle or green oval. So again, another future consideration. And then other transit corridors for consideration. The orangish red line along Diagonal Highway is one area that has been looked at by staff and also at the state level for potential corridor, potential in increased intensities, et cetera. So that's yet another area that we may want to consider in the future. So again, we'll wrap up with some specific questions of council, but again, that's kind of the overview of what staff has looked at and we'd like ultimately some feedback on. At this time, I will turn it over to Jennifer to start to cover the building height discussion.
Thanks, Grant. Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson, Principal Planner. I'm going to talk a little bit about building height. So our current height maximums in most of Longmont's mixed-use commercial and primary employment zones are generally considered at the upper end of what's typically considered low-rise, which would be 4 stories. As a general rule, figure low-rise is 1 to 4 stories, mid-rise 4 to 12, high-rise is above 13, and skyscrapers are their very own special category. So mixed-use corridor, mixed-use downtown, mixed-use employment, mixed-use regional, and primary employment is where you can have a maximum of 4 stories. Now that said, we do also within our land development code offer 3 height bonuses that can effectively be stacked to achieve a maximum height of 7 stories, which would put us into that mid-rise category. Those height bonuses are available for on-site affordable housing, transit proximity, and vertical mixed use along a major corridor, a major center as I defined and envisioned Longmont. So the Sugar Factory Steam Subarea Plan does include recommendations for further study of building heights, including things such as increasing or eliminating maximum height allowances in the Sugar Factory area, benchmarking these heights so that they are in scale, don't overtake effectively the mill and silo structures, potentially setting minimum heights requirements for commercial and residential buildings, and also identifying areas where ground floor commercial is something that we want to require in a multi-story building. So our discussion this evening is really a step towards these recommendations and moving towards them. So staff has reached out to members of the development community as part of this research for really insights on the economics of mid and high-rise buildings, particularly in Longmont. The feedback that we've received has indicated that Longmont still at this point is an unproven market for high-rise and high-density development, particularly given the rents required to make the construction that's necessary for these types of buildings work. Typically, anything over 10 or 12 stories, you're definitely going to require steel construction. That said, the fact that it's not feasible now doesn't mean that it won't be feasible in the future, so it does make sense to have this discussion now. The feedback that we've received, as this slide indicates, up to about 6 stories is roughly what you can do in a, using a frame construction, potentially with a concrete podium. 7 to 13 stories, the rents are really hard to justify the cost of construction. And really what the folks we talked to are saying that the rents that would justify a true high rise are really at this point are only really seeing those in Denver and Cherry Creek and more high-income, high-end markets. So we're not there yet, but that doesn't mean that we won't be there at some point in the future.
Jennifer, I'm going to jump in real quick.
Yeah.
That's also assuming that it's only residential.
Correct. Thank you. Thank you
now,
for clarifying.
if you start looking at it from the perspective of office, building, some other things combined with residential, then the numbers start looking different in terms of what they're able to do financially in terms of building it. So if you wanted to do 2 floors of office is a bad term because office is not doing great right now, but if you looked at sort of an employment-based facility or educational facility on the first 2 to 3 floors, and then you started layering housing on it, then the economics start changing in terms of what people are actually able to fund in that project. And you see that in some other communities where it's not just housing, it's a combination of things of which they're able to then bring some of the costs down on the housing.
Thank you for clarifying, Harold. So, allowing taller buildings doesn't mean they should be permitted everywhere, obviously. Regulatory guardrails can and should be implemented to ensure compatibility with adjacent areas. That said, compatible with doesn't mean identical to, and on this slide, we do have some potential tools that could mitigate adverse impacts from different types of development and having different height allowances in closer proximity. Things that we might consider, which some communities do use, is requiring a conditional use, approval as a conditional use over a certain building height or a certain floor plate area. Various locational criteria in terms of transit proximity or roadway classifications or things of that nature. Certain design standards looking at compatibility, building step backs, urban streetscapes. The lower image does show what a setback and step back combination could do so that you don't have that building looming over a smaller building. We do also have some zoning tools that we could look at, either from a purely doing a straight new zoning districts to strictly address areas where height could be adjusted, or doing something along the lines of an overlay zoning district. So those are some of the tools we have in our toolbox where we could have some guardrails for allowing increased building heights. So next up, we have put together some preliminary massing studies to illustrate what different building heights could look like in different portions of the initial target area we identified. These are simply massing studies and height illustrations. They don't incorporate potential development standards or any sort of tools as far as step backs and setbacks of the like. We can bring back more detailed renderings at council direction, though, but this is really just sort of a starting point, and I'm going to fly through these a bit because this is the bulk of that 52-slide presentation. So South Main Street looking...
But, Jennifer, yeah. And if this looks familiar to you all, it should, because this is the work that was done a few years ago, pre-pandemic, on the STEAM look in this area. So this is a continuation of that project.
Correct. Yeah, we definitely built on that initial effort. So South Main Street, 2 to 6 story, 7 story, what potentially 10 story could look like, going up to 14. Looking north on South Main, looking at 2 to 6 stories, 7, 10, and again, realistically, you would not see a giant block like this. There would be relief in the elevations. And again, then looking in the Dickens Nature area near Boston and Avenue. So this is what potentially 2 to 6 would look like, going up to 7, 10, and 14. And then sugar factory area.
Can I just make,
Sure.
Can you go back to that last slide?
Yeah.
And look what happened when you put 14 up there. There's no view. The mountains disappear.
And that is exactly why we're bringing these visualizations.
Yeah. I just want people to notice that.
Yeah, this type of visualization exercise is very important to this conversation. So looking at the sugar factory, and in the center of the slide, you can see the silos.
Jennifer,
Yes.
Councilor McQuarrie has a question
Real quick,
for you.
Right there where your cursor is.
Yep.
How tall are the sugar silos? Sugar.
Off the top of
Uh,
my
they-
head,
flying in like, coming in around the 16-story height-ish?
I want to say they were, stay tuned, we're looking into that.
Sure.
I don't have that exact number, but I want to say they were.
Close to that?
So following up on that, I think, are you finished? Or?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, looking at this, it almost defeats the concept of some of the things that people came and in our initial rendering of having that as an observation or a place where people might have weddings and having the background of that, and then we have our Sandstone Ranch that area there that has such an incredible view. I mean, I just wonder how that would change that too, from that out at that stage. Would we just see, I mean, I'm not against looking at in a valley here where it really is the valley, maybe some height stuff, but I just wanted.
This is where those guardrails come into play. So this is that initial discussion of like, okay, what could this look like? How do we want to massage this? And maybe this is not appropriate. So, or maybe it's appropriate in some parts of the area. But this is really where that guardrail discussion comes in. So, and then looking at Third and Pace. This is with 10, and this is 14. And then a couple more views. Yep. And Martin Street. So those are some quick generalizations, and that was very fast, I realize. I flew through that. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Laura to talk some other specific types of tools.
And I think when they get to the questions, we're not wanting a definitive answer yet, but there's more work we can do, and if you all can give us a sense of where you want to look at, then we can contract with folks to give better visualizations. We just didn't, I mean, obviously, we want to manage how we're spending our funds in doing this, if you can give us sort of a range.
Good evening, Mayor and members of City Council. Laura Moody, Redevelopment Manager. I will be touching upon some other targeted incentives following up on Jennifer's discussion of height. Oops. One of these other redevelopment incentives we're looking at is the Rapid Response Development Program, and that is a program we've been working on during this year. And we're really looking at a way to expedite the development process for specific priority projects. And right now we're looking at how to identify those priority projects. We have about 8 categories. We're looking at council priorities, making sure that we are in alignment. And we're looking at projects that bring more affordable housing, bring more childcare to childcare deserts in the city, just a few other areas like that, including development in transit-oriented development areas as well as in urban renewal areas. So that's where we align with the urban renewal plan areas. Again, we want to streamline the development review process by looking at the quality of submission materials. So really knowing that you can't expedite a bad submission, you really have to start from the beginning to make sure that you have that accurate information. Really looking at how we're approaching review timelines. Are we going into too many review timelines? How are we aligning within departments? And then what we have in the way of staff capacity, and if we are assigning the right people to work on these projects. The other issue is with planning and development services incentives. We really want to assign certainty to these developers who want to come in and redevelop in these areas. And at the same time, we really want to look at creative problem solving and empower our staff to solve problems creatively. And really looking at how we can create waivers, how we can look at the development guidelines and how we can apply them to these redevelopment projects.
Hey, Laura, hold on. So one of the things as we're talking about budget that I think we need to keep in mind is that, I talked about it earlier about how much of our budget is dependent on sales and use tax. And when we look at what we're seeing right now in the budget, I can say sales tax doing fairly well. Use tax is not. We have to be careful in the fee waiver world in terms of taking that too far out of balance, because the use tax generated on these projects and the sales tax, it is a significant part of our overall budget. So what you're going to hear us talk about in the budget process is the lack of development is actually what is creating the financial headwind that we're seeing right now. And so when we talk about fee waivers, I think we need to tactically look at it, but it also can't be just everybody gets it, because then that creates a different headwind for us financially as we're looking at what we need to do from a financial standpoint.
And along those lines, really looking at financial and regulatory incentives as well. And this is really examining funding mechanisms that are in place that are really designed for new greenfield development, and may not be applicable to redevelopment of existing areas. And the Electrical Capacity Improvement Fund is something that jumps out as something that's designed for bringing electricity to brand new greenfield development, and not for existing redevelopment of projects that already have electricity. So that brings us to the end, and really looking for council input and guidance. So just a few categories, just bringing it back to where just the general areas of what we talked about tonight on the where of the redevelopment areas, which height incentives and bonuses you would consider. Is there a max height that you do have in mind? What additional guardrails are we looking for? And then what other incentives are you open to considering?
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Can we go back to some of those height slides where we can kind of look at the height of a 10-story?
Sure. Is there a particular area you were thinking of?
Well, it's right there. That's 10.
Mm-hmm.
And then go back a couple of slides to show that's 14, and now that's 10. Okay, it almost seems, and that's 7 to what? Got something in the way here. 7-story.
Yeah.
I almost feel, I have seen, not many times do you get a chance to see the real valley of St. Vrain Valley and see where it's at. I had an opportunity years ago to be on the top of the not Dickens, but the Imperial Hotel, and really get a feel for what the valley looked like. And this is an area where higher building heights might be appropriate because of that. But I almost looking at what we're looking at here specifically, probably almost 7 is really hitting the maximum. Otherwise, we lose those view corridors that we're interested in. And the other aspect is, I think of when we saw some general renderings of what maybe could possibly be in this area. When people ask me, I always say it kind of reminds me a little bit of Lion's Head in Vail. And when you start to look at the height of some of those hotels and stuff there, they're not much taller than 7 stories. And so my gut feeling and looking at this, probably 7 is probably the max to make it work. I mean, that's my recommendation looking at the reality of it all here. I don't want to lose. It really takes away any possibility of why you would have a observation deck on those silos, or the view corridor from Sandstone Ranch, which is such a big deal in just this area. When you're just talking this area, there's other areas that I would wonder if there would be a benefit, but that's my opinion thus far. We'll hear other people's.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Can you go back to the questions page, please? Thank you. Because I don't feel that these renderings are particularly useful from a perspective point of view. It's hard to tell what the perspective is sometimes in those renderings. Sometimes they looked quite elevated, so it actually exacerbate what seems like it would be in inhibitants of the view corridor, which it generally probably wouldn't be if you looked at it from ground level. So I'm not going to put a lot of stock into those renderings per se. I think, though, being mindful of view corridors, where to apply in city, I think, is an important part of the conversation. The initial, I guess it was a hatched line around the sugar factory and the southern portion of Steam. I didn't necessarily personally believe that excluding the northern part of Steam was necessary, but it was done in this case. And I think that the future consideration points that were proposed, I think it makes sense in more heavy commercial areas or commercial usages, which would be the Main Street corridor, of course, the hatch line that was already illustrated. I think that you could maybe make a case to a certain extent by the Village at the Peaks area because of the intensity of commercial usage over there. Although, again, you're getting towards the west side of the city, and that starts to become more problematic as far as view corridors are concerned. I'd be hesitant as far as it really probably would be a lot more, I think, pick and choose as far as along the diagonal area of that portion of Ken Proud, I guess, if you will, because obviously we don't have a lot of the diagonal within our city planning zone area. And so I think that's really important as far as where to apply in the city. I think you're going to see more in the valley, more on the east side, and definitely more in commercially concentrated areas. I think that makes sense. Height incentives / bonuses. I mean, I think that we have incentives / bonuses that aren't being used already, and I think they're very good ones that would make a lot of sense for anybody to continue to use. So there's obviously some other factor in that equation where people are not using those bonuses really, at least not to the extent that we would maybe necessarily hope for. With max height, again, this goes kind of to the view corridors issue, but also I think some people a lot of times will say that it ruins the small town feeling of a city. I completely disagree with that argument in the sense that I've been all around the United States. I've been in a lot of smaller towns than Longmont that have much taller buildings. So I don't think a taller building necessarily ruins small town atmosphere. It's what it's used for, where it's placed. I think those kinds of things are more important. And so for a max height for me, I think for Longmont, we've obviously seen what staff has said about financial feasibility of max heights. So I'd go up to 10. I go up to 10 stories for a max height, and don't feel it would be too terribly out of character. I personally, the office building I work in is an 8-story building, and scale-wise really is not, terribly obtrusive like a skyscraper would be. I think those are the ones where you really get the effect of looking up and get a little dizzy almost because it's so tall, where with a 10-story building, I think you probably still keep your perspective fairly well. With guardrails, again, this is about siting. I feel that the places generally enumerated would fall mostly within kind of what we already have for setbacks and stepbacks. To a certain degree, there's definitely portions of North Main that back pretty much almost directly to single-family detached residential. Those would be probably an inappropriate place to site a very large multi-story building. So I think we have those kinds of setbacks already in place, And so there's definitely sections of Main Street that would be appropriate and sections of Main Street that would not. And as far as other fee waivers, incentives are spoken about in the last portion of the presentation. I agree with some of the statements Harold made about we have to be careful with fee waivers and generally some of the waivers. I know that while there is a ton of construction that's finishing up, say in Denver, for instance, I know there's like nothing in the pipeline, and they already have a huge budget issue, and that's going to exacerbate that fact even more, most likely going forward. And we don't need to see that here in Longmont. So we do, I think, need to be very picky when it comes to how we apply waivers. The net benefit, as we've kind of spoken about a little bit earlier with Councilmember Popkins, talk about a completely different subject, but the net benefit of applying fee waivers, for instance, the True North development made a lot of sense for the net value that we get out of that development versus the amount of subsidy that we applied to it to make it possible to happen. And so those are the same things that I think that we should apply when we look forward at any incentives or subsidies provided to new developments is what is the net benefit? What are they providing above and beyond what anybody else would be providing? And so those are it, just to go through the list. I hopefully you captured that. Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, if I can jump in, I think one of the things that we probably didn't highlight enough is, at least what we're hearing, is certainty is probably one of the biggest things that folks want when they're moving in this world and they're looking at it. Is the more uncertain it is, the harder it is for them. I think, Grant, you and I heard that at least 2 to 3 times today in different meetings. Is certainty is a big piece of it. If they know they can come in and they can count on something, that is actually in some cases potentially more valuable than incentives. And it's becoming more and more clear as we're digging into this actually being on the other side of it from the housing authority perspective. I would agree with that. The more certainty we have in terms of what we can do, where we can do it, how we can do it, it makes it easier to start building the pro formas.
So I think I'll weigh in. First of all, where to apply in the city? I think that we need to be careful. We definitely have corridors that can take height, 287, but and transit-oriented development near transit centers, but I don't want that to be interpreted that a bus stop is a transit center. So we have to be very careful about that. Infill in residential areas. I do not think we need a 7-story building in a residential area. If we want the residents to come at us with pitchforks and brooms, then I think we could go height there, but no. I have a real problem with certain areas of cutting off the views of our mountains. That is a selling point in this city, is that we actually have better views of the mountains than Boulder does because we're far enough away to see the range. So where these are placed are very important. I think that if we get a Front Range Community College campus, that a dorm that would be 7 or 8 stories would be acceptable near a campus, and a great selling point for students to take here. But in all of this, what is our goal? That's what I want to know. Are we looking for more use tax? Are we looking to get as many people as we can in the city? I want to know what the target is, because I can't see putting any of this in place until we have a mass transportation system, because we have no really good regional transportation at this point. We will have with 119, and hopefully if 287 comes back to Longmont. And I'm concerned about the River District and having very tall buildings there, Sunset Street is a major arterial for that, for part of that river district, and it is a 2-lane road. I don't know that there's any way to expand that without doing eminent domain. So are we looking at this in a holistic way, or are we just looking at where do we want to put tall buildings? And that, I think that's important that all of that comes into this conversation.
I think what they presented is to say all the other areas are areas that can be considered in the future. In this case, what we're presenting to you is if council wanted to do this, we think the best place to start is actually in this area that's identified in the dotted lines, which really is STEAM in that urban center, located adjacent to the transit facility and those types of things for all of the reasons that you all have touched on. Also because it's not adjacent to neighborhoods. It is in that commercial corridor. So if you were going to start, I think what we're saying is our suggestion is if you want to do this, this is the best place to start. You can then start, we can build graphics for you to show view corridors and things like that when we come back. But I think this is where they were saying the initial area of focus being.
So if we put into code on these initial areas, if someone wanted to build in another area, would that code apply to them?
That was one of the things that Jennifer touched on, is you could actually do an overlay zone to create it where it would only apply to the zone that you identified in. So it wouldn't apply citywide.
Okay, I think 7 stories is the height that I would, in specific areas within these LURA areas. Matthew Popkin?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Peck, and thank you, Jennifer and Grant and Laura, for starting to think about this constructively here. A couple clarifying questions. Jennifer, I think you had put up, or maybe it was Laura, there was a line that if more than 3 new legal lots were being created, maybe this was under the rapid response section. Could we pull that back up again?
It's a lot of slides. I think it's.
Yeah, here we go. What does that mean when we say a waiver of preliminary plat requirement if more than 3 new legal lots are being created? What does that mean?
Yeah, so council member, essentially right now, as you're probably familiar with, anytime that there is more than 3, applicants have to go through both the preliminary plat process as well as the final plat process. And so one of the options, and Harold touched upon this a little bit, is if we wanted to ensure certainty and potentially remove some of the time frame of development, we could eliminate that again in either a specific area or for specific type of projects, similar to what was discussed and ultimately applied for affordable housing.
I see. Thank you. So that's a process streamlining there. It doesn't remove a kind of review in the process ultimately, but it just simplifies this number of steps.
Correct.
Is that correct, Grant?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. I like that general direction here to Harold's point of not only. Great. Then the next question I had is building on Councilmember Rodriguez's question before or comment before. Why aren't the current height bonuses working? or what is their utilization?
I think I'm only, and where's Molly? Did Molly? I think I'm only aware of one location where they're potentially considering it. I think it depends on the type of project. So we only know of one location where they're using the height bonuses, correct? And
Right.
and I think it depends, obviously, transit-oriented development is one piece of it that honestly will only, I think in terms of how council's talking about it, it's not bus stops. It is transit station, it is the Twin Peaks Mall urban renewal area, because that's going to be part of bus rapid transit, and then something maybe north of Longmont where it's not developed, but in Longmont, where they have the RTD site pinned. Really, those are your three primary, if you look at TOD related to bus rapid transit. So you got to start there in terms of where are the locations. When you look at it from an affordable housing standpoint, the minute that you go above 5.
Correct. At 5 stories, it kicks in commercial Davis-Bacon wage rates, which are significantly higher. And so unless you're adding more than 5, it doesn't make the financials pencil.
So part of it then is if you said you could only go up to 5 and you had the affordable housing and you're bringing in federal funds or some type of tax credits, then when it kicks it in, it makes the financials go upside down on you. So, and then what was the third one? Transit-oriented develop, mixed use and vertical. You will see some of that utilized in that single story, but the other two are less utilized. And I think to a certain extent, and as we're talking about some of these areas where council's given us direction to look at things at the Sugar Mill and First and Main Transit, I think some of these folks, if they knew they could go to X, it's frankly easier for them to plan it versus having to rely on the bonuses, because then there's uncertainty as to whether or not they actually get that height, which creates cost for them. If that makes sense. If you're going through the design process and the engineering and you're having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not million, through the process and then you don't get it, that's where they start adjusting what they're willing to look at.
Are there any other
Thank you.
questions or directions?
Yeah. So, Harold, one of the other things, just building on Councilmember Rodriguez's point before as well on the massing, I recognize that these are very preliminary kind of diagrams, but it also does kind of show a uniformity in height there at a certain level that I don't think is kind of reflected by what the market would actually do, and what I've seen in other communities too, where you might have one building that's 7 stories, one that's 4, one that's 2, different types based on the different types of use to create that space. And so I guess I'd love to see a more varied approach based on what we actually think would make sense, like would be potentially conceived there. As we go and refine whatever the thresholds are that are set. I generally agree with the sentiments expressed by other council members on kind of the heights and view sheds here as well. And perhaps another point, I can share some examples with staff of like real world examples in different areas where you'll see like a 7-story building, a 3-story building, a 2-story building, kind of all coexisting harmoniously. And it's not this uniform kind of step up. I want to ask, when we define mixed use, do we think about that in terms of only vertical mixed use, or do we also think about that in terms of horizontal mixed use? For instance, like a condominium building, and then let's say a 5-story condominium building that doesn't have retail on the ground floor, it's just condos. And then you go over to the next building, and that is, 3-story commercial, an office space, or like with penthouse apartments or something. Then you go over next, like, can we think about mixed use as a horizontal spread as well as vertical, and factor that into our incentive or procedural streamlining, or do we only define that vertically?
So for clarity, currently in terms of the incentives and the height bonuses that we were talking about, that is based upon vertical, but there's no reason why we couldn't also explore a true horizontal mixture of uses and incentivize that in some way, whether equal or a ratio therein. That's definitely something we could explore.
And your question earlier, Mayor, Council, when there was a question of why aren't they using it, that's actually another reason why they're not necessarily getting that extra floor. I think some of you all were in a session that I was in at CML when they were talking about how cities have put in this, you have to put commercial and then you get the floor, but they're not actually doing it because the commercial's not filling up, and so then it becomes a cost drain on the project. And so I do think there is value in looking at it horizontally, because in some cases it is clear in certain areas that financially things don't start penciling. If you required every building that was beside each other to have commercial on the ground floor, that's going to create a different economic pressure.
Yeah, I'd love to make sure that we are enabling, like not precluding that from happening. If that would be a preferred way to get multiple uses still in a similar area, but also work with that. My understanding is sometimes you can have different types of utilities that you need to build out if you have a vertical mixed use structure versus if you just had single use verticals that are doing different things based on what you're building out. So we'd just love for us to make sure we're not precluding that or offering flexibility there that still doesn't penalize the spirit of the mixed uses in a certain area. Then just a couple last comments. I like the direction of the electric infrastructure fee waivers there, and maybe similar things or other process flexibility with streets, utilities, stuff that we learned from True North. I'm at the reason I'm not in person is I'm at the National Brownfield Conference right now. And part of the goal there is thinking about leveraging existing infrastructure footprints versus expanding the infrastructure footprint overall. And leveraging our existing footprint is exactly what we're talking about here. So I'd love to make sure that we're like finding the right incentives to complement our existing infrastructure rather than expanding what we have to cover. And then I think the last point here is I'd be curious if there are any downsides to thinking about the river district as part of the kind of expanded dotted line area that you'd shown before, and kind of extending that for contiguous redevelopment purposes from a vision standpoint. I think they're a few years behind there on the visioning, but I recently saw the Brownfield Advisory Committee's River District draft plan there, and think that it could be helpful, not necessarily from a height standpoint, but just from a process standpoint, to consider extending some of the incentives to that area. So I think that's where I'll pause for now. Thank you.
Councilor Christ.
Thank you, Mayor. And particularly, thank you for some of your comments regarding looking in a more holistic way, or looking at the whole picture, and better transportation. These are all serious concerns. I also think, I don't have the list of the questions in front of me anymore, but some of the notes I took was, if we're talking about where to apply, as with all real estate, it's all about location. So location will drive the height, I think, but also when we're looking at incentives, bonuses, all that, and also just where, a lot of that needs to be driven by economic growth. So I'm not necessarily talking about retail but we need to think more in a bold way of what does Longmont need that Longmont does not have. And I think that the sugar mill area really needs an arena or stadium or some kind of cultural area attached to that in order to bring more business into the city. And I believe having that kind of vision would then also drive what would surround it. So, that's food for thought. Height incentives, I don't really think height incentives or bonuses should be on the table in that kind of scenario, because you're really talking about real high dollar commercial ventures. Maximum height and throughout the city probably should be 5 stories or less, and only where the land drops off to allow for 5 stories. And I'm thinking here along Martin, across from the cannery, we have a building that's 4 stories, and it works there. And as we go further east, the land drops off further or lower, and maybe a 5-story would be appropriate there. 4 and 5 stories are attractive because they require elevators, so they will age well along with the demographics. In that, as people become older, they want to be able to use an elevator to get to their apartment. I think the key there, when we're talking about 5 stories and where land allows, is that the guardrail should be that the height of the building should be about tree height or lower. Because one of the things about that 4-story building on Martin across from the cannery is when you are seated below that, say down at the wastewater treatment facility or over at one of the hotels south of there, and you look up, you still see trees and you see a little bit of building. So it is softer in terms of the visibility that you lose, because you already are seeing something natural rather than building. Let's see. Not supporting other incentives at this time. I think it would have to be particular to the project. Like I say, if you're going to go with a bold project, you want to start with the scenario that's best for the city. And then as other carrots are brought to the table to sweeten the deal, then you can offer some incentives to make those carrots a reality. So, to go full circle to a conversation that the mayor and I were having, is I think we have to decide exactly what we want. Having the goal in mind helps drive some of these scenarios. But that's my direction at this time. And thank you so much for the presentation. And the graphics were wonderful, very helpful.
Councilor Popkin?
Yeah, just one brief comment there. I think I understand the spirit of Councilmember Christ's comments there, but I wanted to note one specific thing. You know, I think she referred to kind of we want the incentives to apply to the specific project, but I think that negates the very intention of some of the procedural streamlining that we're aiming for here. If one of the goals here is, which at least was from my motion a while back on the urban renewal innovation zone concept, if the primary goal there is to help streamline the reuse and reactivation of complex sites, then particular project-based incentives doesn't offer that clarity and predictability. It doesn't allow someone to plan financially and design-wise for those specific things in a reliable and cost-effective way. And I think that's where we maybe we want to have some exceptions or conditional uses for height bonuses. I understand some of that, but when we're talking about some of the other procedural streamlining or incentives don't always have to be monetary, right? And that's what I think staff has already shown here, that you can have procedural streamlining, different zone allowances or flexibility of uses or design approaches, and even financial incentives or fee waivers. But the clarity and predictability up front allows for some of that innovation to take place, rather than them having to go through a whole conditional process to try to just get that exception. And so I think that negates the spirit of what's intended here. And I don't want us to fall on our own sword here and create a procedural streamlining exception situation that they may or may not be able to get. that doesn't achieve the goal of what we're aiming for, to make these complex site reuses more feasible. So I just wanted to make that point here as we think about it. I don't mind certain exceptions here and there, to Councilmember Chris's point, but I want to make sure that overall, if we're going to move forward with this, we do so in an intentional way that offers clarity to the market.
So I don't see anyone else in the queue. Okay. Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilor Popkin when he was saying if somehow within that area, I know you all are illustrating the Sugar Mill area in that area. That's the area we're talking about. And I do like the idea of making sure that that developer is for that area and not all developments can have that opportunity. Thinking that they can just build whatever they want, how high they want. But with Councilman Popkin brought up the idea of having the different levels together right around one another. And I think that will be really unique and creative as well. For me, in that area that you all presented is about the Sugar Mill, when you were illustrating the different heights, you could still see, I thought, with going up to 10. So in that area, I don't see why we couldn't go up to 10. Now, if we're talking on Main Street or other areas, I don't think so. I think we would have to, what you say, 5 will be worth the developer's time to do it at least 5 stories, and that will be it. And we already know that anything under 5, it wouldn't be an advantage for them or beneficial for them to develop anything. So I would say in that area that you presented, the Sugar Mill area, me personally, I would say 10 because you could still see the mountains and you can still see the area. So for me, I would say 10, and I agree with Councilmember Popkin and Rodriguez regarding the incentives and height incentives.
Mayor Pro Tem Hidalgo Ferring.
Thank you. So in looking at where to apply in the city, I think that within that blue dotted area, and that's really what we're looking at. I know you had presented that list, and it kind of got confusing that, okay, are we actually looking to incorporate that? Because there were some areas that were named that I was very concerned about. For me, I could see the 10 stories in the sugar factory area, in the steam corridor. I would think 7, but if we're looking to create that certainty, I would have to stick with the 7. There was a slide that you had that showed the cost benefits, like between certain stories. I think from like 2 to 6 stories or 7 stories, and then it's not cost effective. So realistically, currently for residential. And then, so if we were looking at, so in the sugar factory area, it would be mixed use. So, okay. And then beyond that, so not cost effective due to construction. So
remember, this is
Yeah.
only if it's purely housing.
Housing, and then when you add that.
When you add other components to it, the cost structure starts changing.
Okay, and then when we look at parsing out areas, is it confusing to developers when we say, maybe the steam area, 7 stories, sugar factory area, 10 stories? Does that add like an extra layer of confusion or just?
Yeah, Jennifer chimed in. I was going to say the same thing. As long as we clearly define it up front,
Okay.
geographically,
Yes.
that certainty and the knowledge will be there when they come into planning to start
Okay.
their entitlement process. So
Okay.
again, as long as it is clear and it's not a moving target, so to speak,
Yes.
no, I don't think that would create unnecessary confusion in the development
Okay,
community.
I mean, because that would be my suggestion on that piece. And then if you can go back to the questions, I think. So, yeah, so looking at the maximum heights, I am a little leery around the fee waivers at this time, you know, and looking at, and looking at, I could see process waivers, just, I mean, I'm looking at our bottom line as well as a city and what we can, what we can pick up as far as monetary. That was concerning to look at the use tax going down. I think I answered. Did I answer everything? What else do you need from me? Forgot.
So I think if I can paraphrase
Yeah.
what I think I'm hearing from you all to help them. I want to kind of go back to fee waivers. One of the reasons I think we said looking at the urban renewal area of Sugar Mill and the southeast urban renewal area is you actually have urban renewal as a tool.
Okay.
And so utilizing urban renewal as a tool probably puts less of an emphasis on the fee waivers because you can actually use the urban renewal increment to offset some of those expenses that still lets you bring fee waivers into the equation. So you have tools in there that you don't necessarily have in other areas of the community.
Okay.
It's also in an enterprise zone. And so there's other financial tools that can maybe lessen the pressures of needing fee waivers.
Okay.
Most of those are going to take a development agreement anyway because it will be in conjunction with the Urban Renewal Authority. So it's a good testing ground because you're going to get pretty refined and specific in that area, but they still want to know kind of what are our parameters. That's that certainty starting to show back up again in that. So what I think I heard, and you all were a little bit
Squishy.
in different places. I do think Councilmember McCoy said 7 was something that you were looking at. Councilmember Rodriguez said 7 to 10.
I want to clarify, but yeah.
Okay, so if you want to clarify that while I'm keeping notes, that'd be great for me.
Oh, thank you, Mayor Peck. So I said essentially 10, but let's say we're talking about just purely residential base, no height bonuses involved, 7. And then we keep the 3 height bonus categories in place, which potentially would bring it to 10 if you utilized all 3. And so that would be 10, but let's say the base is 7. So that's my clarification on my statements. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Popkin, did I hear 7 to 10 from you? Depending on the variation in the height?
I'll echo what Councilmember Rodriguez said
Okay.
there. I think that was well stated and generally aligns with what I think would make sense. But again, it's not inherently a uniform allowance, and so I think that's we want to think about it as a district at a district level or a master plan level, so that it's not a block, right? Like what we're seeing there. And if there's an option for staff to let me share my screen for a moment, I can show a real life example of kind of just the differences of what it would look like there, but maybe that's not possible. Just to make it look tangible and show kind of what this could look like in an adaptive reuse situation.
Stop share.
Thank you, perfect. So like, for example here, this is in San Antonio, Texas, which is objectively a larger city than we are, but this is a great example of an old kind of bottling facility here that became a whole mixed-use plaza development here. And you can see like you have different degrees of heights here. If you add up this hotel that's there, I think that's 8 to 9 stories. You have a 7 to 8 story apartment building on the left with some mixed use in the bottom. You have like a 3 to 4 story building and some of the old adaptive reuse areas on kind of the right side of the screen. And so just to show kind of how the differences of height kind of define the space and make it look like something that fits in and not just like, hey, let's just build a wall of buildings as high as we can that's allowed, right? And so that level of adaptability in kind of at a district level or master planning level, I think could work in certain parts that we're talking about, not necessarily applied consistently across the board. And so I just wanted to maybe share that in case that helps make some of this tangible. Thank you.
Mayor, did you say 7 or 5?
I said 7.
Okay.
But I do have a couple of questions. When you were talking about the Village at the Peaks area, did that include, that urban area include Hobby Lobby area as well? Did it stretch out there?
Yeah, it borders by Nelson, Hover
So-
to the north, and then I gotta get my directions. South to just on the inside of 119.
Okay. So knowing that at the corner of Hover and Nelson in the Hobby Lobby area where the old Walmart is, if we go 7 to 10 or 5 to 7, whatever the majority would be, how tall would that building be there?
We're not proposing as staff to start there. We're simply saying that could be a place that we would go to next. What we're saying really is that dotted line is the starting area.
And that was my very first question, is that once we start this, once it's in code and they are in an urban renewal area, would they not want?
No, you could
To
do
have
overlay
that.
zones by specific areas.
Okay, that is just my concern, that once the developers see this, then that is what they would want to do. On the incentives, could we possibly have an incentive that the bottom floor must be for older residents? Because we do need to recognize that we are an aging population and that they do want to have zero step and downsizing ability within our city limits. So, yep, 5
Okay.
to 7 was what I said in those incentives. Councilor McCoy.
Well, to kind of piggyback on what the mayor's saying in regards to that, try to encourage, and I've heard Councilmember Chris say this too, about that aging population in regards to elevators and that sort of thing. That brings in a certain degree of attractiveness to developments like this for people to get out of the single family house and move into something more densely populated. So I think that's a benefit. I do hear where council members Popkin and Rodriguez were pointing out the issue around that bonus and bringing it to a height of 10 if it did have multi-use aspects to it. And I think that I could compromise with that depending on the particular of the specific area. So if that gives you better guidance from more of a majority of council, I'm going to add that in.
And I think Councilmember Chris said 5. And then Councilmember Hidalgo Ferring and Chiquita again 7 in that 10 convert. And Councilmember Hidalgo Ferring and Chiquita. Yarborough said in that 7 to 10 kind of what I'm hearing. We're not going to bring back an ordinance saying this is what we're going to do. What you're doing is narrowing the guidance. So then we're going to come back and actually now pay somebody to take the massing and start incorporating your comments on to the point of the different heights variations and the view corridors and going back to Sandstone Ranch and utilizing. Do you have some of those slides that we? So what we'll start doing is actually, this is what council had us do in the last run when we looked at the STEAM. we'll start building images like this that actually start giving you the dimension that you're looking at in terms of height and what that means. One of the things that we actually did for the Costco project that helped them is you actually start driving a car through the roads as you're coming in on 119, so you can start seeing the difference in massing and the view corridors. We wanted to get this type of direction to get a little bit more fine-tuned and nuanced, because we do have the money to do this, but you can spend a lot of money if you're not narrowing your focus down on this. So we'll be doing that work and then bring that back to you all to see with more of a real-life look at this versus just the big blocks.
So to that point, the example that Councilor Popkin put up was beautiful because those buildings were beautiful. And you know, this design, these block designs are like old factories.
Right.
Not interesting.
Yeah.
So, again, design standards, people.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So if that makes sense to you all, that's the approach we're going to take, and we'll start doing that work next.
Thank you, Grant and Jennifer and Laura. I know it's a lot of work.
Thanks.
Let's take a 5-minute break. We are back. It's been 5 minutes. We'll welcome Grant back up to our conditional uses.
Good evening again. Mayor, members of council, again, Grant Penland with Planning and Development Services. This will definitely be hopefully a much shorter presentation, not 52 slides, but we'll jump right in. Maybe. All right, so just by way of brief background, council did adopt regulations in 2021 that applied to all major developments that were adjacent to city parks, greenways, and open space that essentially required those to go in front of council for approval. And so the key term, of course, is adjacent with respect to that standard. And the current ordinance does define adjacent to include all sizes of right-of-way. Recently, council reviewed the conditional use permit for In-N-Out restaurant, and that was due to its adjacency, again, as defined by any size of right-of-way. So in that case, the In-N-Out restaurant was required to come in front of city council. It is separated from the subject property to open space by Highway 19. Based upon that, council did ask some questions and express some concerns about that definition and potential implications. Based upon that input, staff did come up with two options for consideration. Option one, as articulated in staff's report, was to remove the right-of-way consideration in its entirety, and option two would be a street type-based adjacency, essentially lowering the classification. So jumping into a little bit more detail of those two options. Option one, again, removal of the right-of-way consideration. Essentially what that would do is only apply adjacency in situations where the subject property actually shared a common property line or immediately abutted, again, city-owned parks, open space, greenway. So again, that would be one option, and a second option would be, again, to essentially lower the street type to a smaller type of roadway, which I'll show you the general types here in a moment. But in this scenario, essentially, it would only apply, or that adjacency criteria would only apply if the subject property was separated by a local street. And didn't have direct contact. So again, if it was the case of a collector, larger road such as an arterial, highway, et cetera, that adjacency would no longer apply. So that's at a high level the two options that staff has proposed and again summarized in the communication. So council, as is typical, has multiple options. Again, as outlined, option one would be to remove that right-of-way consideration in its entirety, so it would no longer apply to adjacency. And then option two would basically be utilizing rather the local roadway street cross section only in the cases of determining adjacency. Of course, another option would be for council to actually modify the language in a different manner as desired by council. And then fourth and final, of course, taking no action and retaining the existing definition, which again would include all types of right-of-way. As mentioned, staff is recommending option two, which would be to just use a lower street classification, local to define adjacency. And then I will jump to, just for reference, this is our chart of the street types. At the top is or highway rather, which, as noted, varies immensely, but it is larger than an arterial typically. But then it goes down through collector types and then local types of roads, generally reducing down from 75 down to about 55. Then I also included the urban neighborhood local standards. So all of those are locals. They just happen to vary in width based upon whether or not they have parking, one side, two sides, attached walks or no attached walks. So the range there is at the high end 61 and at the low end approximately 38. So that's just give you some perspective. So again, based upon staff's recommendation, the adjacency in option number 2 would only apply to streets, basically types that are listed in the lower portion, and then the bottom 2 in the upper portion. So you're looking at, again, the typical maximum width of about 61 feet. So again, walking through there, staff is recommending option number 2, and I'll conclude staff's presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
So I do have one. I know that you explained this earlier, but because it's on a recording, could you explain what a collector street is?
Sure. Broadly, collector intent is to basically collect or bring multiple local roadways to a collection point that then would transition to a larger arterial or main artery through the city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So just to try to get some sort of illustration basis, the smallest residential collector parking one side says 64 feet. Can you give an example of a residential collector that's 64 feet?
That is a great question.
Like, what would, okay, so while the houses don't face 17th Avenue, 17th Avenue is fairly large for a residential area.
And I believe 17th is actually designated as an arterial.
As an arterial?
Yes.
Because that's definitely not 120 feet.
Correct. And it could be an older cross-section, so what's shown on screen would be today's minimums.
Okay, today's minimums. Yeah, I mean, that would just be a little more helpful. Because I'm just trying to see, like, what the smallest collector is. That's, I guess, I mean, right now it says 64 by today's standards, but is there a residential collector that's smaller than 64 feet?
Lashley is
Lashley.
residential collector parking 2 sides.
And you include the attached sidewalks?
Correct.
As part of the right of way?
That is correct.
Right, so that adds some square footage there, or some linear feet, I should say.
Mountain views.
Mountain View.
That may be residential collector one side. 'Cause
Yeah,
there's
it
some
varies, but yeah, I think
varies.
primarily it's single
So I
side.
think Mountain View would probably be the residential collector one side.
I mean, with that in mind, I think I can get behind collector being the baseline, if you will. Collector and larger would be not necessarily required for a city council hearing. I believe is what the whole concept of this is.
That is correct.
Yes. Also knowing that there's probably not a lot of opportunities for particularly significant development on the older collector streets that are residential collectors because they're built out, generally speaking.
Redevelopment potentially.
Maybe, but
yeah.
they're generally built out with pretty established neighborhoods at this point. So I think I can agree with the staff's recommendation of collector and up. Thank you.
I think we've
I
lost
agree with that also.
Councilmember Pocken.
His
Yeah, he's asking to be admitted. He's in the waiting room.
Is he on? Okay.
I don't see him.
Yeah, he's right here.
I'm back. Apologies. Apologies. I am not on Nextlate right now. I'm on a hotel Wi-Fi.
I can't see you, so if you raise your hand, someone's going to have to tell me.
I will.
Councilor McCoy.
Mayor Peck, I agree with this. It's just I think it's just option 2 is the best recommendation here, and so staff's recommendation is what I'm going to be supporting.
Councilor Christ.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question. This was spurred on by our conversation about In-N-Out. But there were other buildings that were built in that area that I don't think we had to review. What was the difference?
So the main difference is the application type. So the In-N-Out is a major development application. In that case was a conditional use site plan. So it does go in front of our planning commission. But again, because of the adjacency, it had to go on to city council. So that would be the example. The other projects that were out there were just approved via a site plan, a minor application.
So would we have very many similar type situations as In-N-Out Burger, or is that kind of rare?
Potentially. It of course depends on demand. So again, drive-through restaurants in those scenarios would be, they would fit that category generally, particularly along those categories or along those corridors. Essentially anything that is a conditional use permit would again have to go on to city council. So we see more minor applications than major, but again, there's at least a decent, if I had to guess, last year, Planning Commission probably saw half a dozen, maybe a little fewer conditional use permits, just for, context. Again, not necessarily adjacent to open space, but just in terms of processing.
Okay. I just wondered how much time we're actually saving with this. So I could get behind option number 2.
Councilor Popkin. Councilor Popkin. Oh, there you are.
Yeah. What would be the unintended consequences, Grant, or could potentially be unintended consequences of option number 1?
Which one?
Of option number 1, was that your inquiry?
Yeah, what would be some potential unintended consequences if we went with option 1?
Yeah, if there were no inclusion of right of way at all, there could be a scenario where I guess it could be a very, very narrow street in which, again, a use like a drive-through could have more of an impact on that adjacent open space.
Okay, thank you. Then I don't really have any concerns with going with option number 2 here, per other council member direction. Thanks.
So, Councilman Pumpkin, your microphone's kind of low. Did you say you would go with option 2?
Yeah, I share a lot of the same sentiments that has already been expressed for option number 2.
Okay, thank you. You have direction, Councilor Hidalgo Ferring. Oh, my goodness.
I'll go with option 2.
I think that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you again. We are now at the inclusionary housing sales price maximum methodology. And Molly O'Donnell is going to present for us.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Molly O'Donnell, Housing Director. Christy Wiseman, Housing Investment Manager, is also here. And we're going to be talking about our inclusionary housing sales prices for 2025. Okay, so to give a very brief background, this is in relation to our inclusionary housing ordinance. When a developer chooses to provide for sale units as part of that development. This often applies to Habitat as well. And then also the city has used this for its public-private partnership project, True North. And so we do rely on these sales prices for a variety of ways. Really what this means is when a developer chooses to provide a for sale unit, they have to sell that unit below a maximum sales price that the city sets each year. In the history, we first had our inclusionary housing ordinance put into effect in 2018 with a sales price maximum calculation methodology at the time. And then in 2022, council modified that methodology, just learning over time through implementation of the IH program. Also, we were about to face, we were in the midst of facing a lot of market change and really wanted to make sure that our methodology reflected the true cost of housing. I'm also mentioning up here, because this will come forward later as well, we do also have incentives for if you provide middle tier or attainable homes. So those are for sale between 80 and 120% AMI. Then you can get a reduction in the amount of capital A affordable requirements under your inclusionary housing requirement. So I just wanted to highlight that here. That'll come in later. And really, that's because what our fine-tuning efforts over the past few years have really been in an attempt to get it right so that we actually get for sale units provided on site in market rate developments. So it's constant fine-tuning that we've been doing. Our maximum sales price is calculated using HUD provided income levels. We use a payment standard of 33% of your gross monthly income. HUD's minimum and the standard they use is 30%. We chose 33% for our market. We take into account a variety of factors when calculating our maximum sales price. Mortgage principal costs after an assumption of a 5% down payment. We factor in mortgage interest, so this is private mortgage insurance for those that, this is typical mortgage insurance. We'll get there. Interest, we'll get to insurance later. An average of the prior 15 months. Property taxes, and those are updated annually based on the new mill levies and assessment rates. Here we are, private mortgage insurance monthly premiums, and we get this data from FHA every 3 years to incorporate. We also, every 3 years, incorporate Longmont specific HOA survey data from IRES, a data management system, and our homeowners insurance averages that come out of the Colorado Division of Insurance survey data. So those things we only do every 3 years. A guiding principle of this formula really is to ensure that the people buying and living in the homes provided through a developer's inclusionary housing requirement are left in a stable financial commitment, stable financial situation, and not paying too much for their monthly mortgage payment and the ancillary costs that go with it, so that they can remain stably housed and have enough money for the other things in life. So it really is geared towards that buyer. I would say that we update most of this annually, including we use the income data as the starting point. But that 3-year data, we're going to show you here in a moment. Let me make sure I didn't skip that. Yep. We'll show you how that has resulted in some challenges as well. So here was our 2024 sales price maximums. These went into effect around June of last year, once all the data was available. Historically, we put the new sales price methodology in place in 2022. the maximums then reduced slightly in 2023 and then reduced slightly again in 2024. And that really is because of rising interest rates. That was the main driver, lowering a buyer's buying power in essence. So here's what we have in effect today. And we can always come back to this if you ever want to go through a scenario. But here we are at the 3-year mark since we did the updated methodology. In our market, generally our sales prices are flattening. However, buying power has gone down because of, again, high interest rates year over year, increased valuation affecting property taxes, and increased homeowners insurance, which this is where the homeowners insurance, the data that we collect every 3 years is starting to show that that is a challenge because we had a skyrocket in the costs of HOAs, homeowners insurance, and property taxes based on valuations. But generally, we've had a downward trend in these maximums. That means we've kept pace with the buyers' buying power. However, developers are struggling big time to be able to produce units and sell them at the prices that we have. So really, it's a constant lever pulling to see how do you build a program that works in a changing market, also still keeps in mind the guiding principle of ensuring affordability for those that live there, also actually feasible to build and deliver. So the question we are here at today is, with our 2025 sales prices showing a further reduction, what would council like to do? So we're going to go over some options for that. Sure.
So one of the things that we are seeing in the budget process is the impact of taxes is actually flattening, because as the states changed their ratios, that's actually, it's a tailwind on the housing side. It's a headwind in our budget because that's reducing the amount of money that we're getting in property tax. So it was a headwind, but now it's actually shifting based on the adjustments the states have made.
Right. And what you see here is really about assessed value, not so much the assessment rates, because there has been action there to try and address that. Here's just examples of how our sales prices have flattened. Our housing expenses have increased dramatically because, again, they were increasing anyway, but now we have it all 3 years in one fell swoop. And then showing our assessed values out of our Longmont's Economic Indicators report. So here's our 2025 sales price maximums. I will just tell you generally, they have reduced. For the higher affordability levels, they have reduced slightly. For the lower affordability levels, they've reduced significantly, because the more that you add on to housing costs, the less wiggle room you have to work with within that maximum housing payment that you can afford. So those prices have come down pretty significantly. And you heard that from Dave Emerson earlier as well. So the affordability tension, how do you build a program that moves with the market appropriately, also works for the buyer and works for a developer? Really, it's been the last few years, obviously buyers have had a harder time getting into the market. Also, developer constraints have also increased. Construction, financing, and insurance costs and continue to rise. And really their pro formas do not pencil enough to sell homes at these prices. We know that there's certain levers that they can and cannot pull, what is within their realm of control. And we do know that reducing profit margins is not always within their realm of control. Sometimes that is constrained by their lending institutions, because that is, if the market takes a dive, that is the last resort funding source to cover those losses. Bottom line, on the buyer side, our housing needs assessment from 2023 showed this as well, is that home ownership is out of reach for families below 100% AMI unless there is subsidy, meaning down payment assistance or a reduced price, or some other form. What that means, 100% AMI, just to reiterate what we've talked about when we went over our housing needs assessments in recent years, that means half of Longmont makes less than that and half of Longmont makes more than that. That means home ownership is out of reach for half of Longmont residents. It also means that it's not getting any easier for them, but also developers are facing some of the same constraints, so their needs are going up. So really, it has become very clear through our history in the inclusionary housing program, our pilot project with True North, working with Habitat, that really substantial incentives are needed to produce any units below 100% AMI. We will not get units from a market rate developer below 100% AMI because they don't come with subsidy, and they are still trying to be in the black on their pro formas. So we started playing with the levers in our calculator. We said, what would it look like if we went up to 35% of income? What if we changed the time period on the look back for interest rates? What if we looked at only new build costs versus all median sales prices? And really playing with all of those, they did not make meaningful change to the numbers that would then incent a developer to be able to do this. It's really trying to find the methodology that strikes that balance between the buyer and the developer. So what it really does show is our calculator is moving in alignment with the market. It does reflect buying power well for the buyer. However, so playing with the math on the buyer side, which is what our tool is focused on, that won't solve this problem and result in new units. That problem remains, and the developers cannot afford to build the product. So we said, what else could we do then? What else could we think of that's either more programmatic or out of the box to try and ease the situation? So the first and most immediate question we have for you all is, should we hold steady at the 2024 maximums for now and do some work and assess in 2026? You heard that this would be helpful for Habitat. We also know that True North is about to assign lots to our buyers, and they need to know which sales price maximum they're going to be subject to. And if the 2025 ones go into effect, they will, about 2 of the 6 unit types will have a 1 or 2% decrease in sales price. They're right there. 2 of them wouldn't be impacted, but the townhome product would have to go down in sales price by 12%. So that is a pretty significant impact for that project. So this, I'm going to go over a couple of programmatic options to consider next, but I think we'll come back to this to have 2 questions answered. Should we hold steady or should we implement? And then what other options do you want to consider? So the first of the programmatic, but option number 3 overall, we could change to update the homeowner's insurance data, all the data that we collect every 3 years. We could change that to every 1 year just to ease the blow. So it's not 3 years consecutive, all put in at one time, just incremental change. We could lock in the sales price maximum at the recording of entitlements. Right now, it's locked in at certificate of occupancy so that it better matches the timeline of when the sale is going to actually happen. However, that isn't necessarily just like this True North example. They have been building a pro forma, they went through the entitlements process, they're actually constructing, and they're here at the last minute at the finish line and trying to confirm their sales price levels. So if we changed it to lock in the sales price maximum at the recording of entitlements, that would give better certainty to developers so they know what, if they're constructing 18 months from now, they're at a sale point, they've known for that 18 months what to expect. We could include an option they could lock in at entitlements. If the annual sales price maximums increase, they could move up with it. which I'm comfortable with on the buyer side because that is actually matching market conditions at that time and buying power at that time. If the maximum prices reduce by the time they get to CO, they could have locked in at that higher price. So that would result in the buying power being somewhat mismatched. So that's just something to consider.
Yeah, we're going to, Councilor Popkin, we're going to go through this presentation first, if you don't mind.
I just have one clarifying question to make sure I'm understanding a term that was used, if that's all right.
How many more slides do you have?
There's 7 options, so you have 3 left.
Let's go through the options first, Councilor.
Okay.
Okay. Number 5, this is not necessarily impacting the sales price maximums, but if we are trying to, the goal is to incent further provision of units, income restricted units, we could modify the middle tier incentive, which is if you provide attainable homes, you can have a reduced inclusionary inclusionary housing requirement. This is just something to attempt to further entice developers to provide units on site. This council did modify this in the end of 2023 with our attainable housing fee waiver program. So they've been modified once so far, but here we are 2 years later and we haven't seen anybody yet elect this. Number 6, and this is the biggest policy question of the options, raising the limit on capital A affordable housing in the IH code to 100% AMI. This would, it sounds like a big change, but when considering that our housing needs assessment data supports the fact that basically building anything less than this requires subsidy, also other funding programs out there that we are using, including Prop 123, they set their limit at 100% AMI. It would have some alignment with other programs and also match our housing needs data. So this is an option. This could, what this would require is a code change, and then we would also need to consider what that would do with the fee waiver program. Because right now, if you provide 12% or more of your units on site, you can access fee waivers in varying degrees of percentage waived. But there could be some trickle effects, but we're also looking at our fee waiver program for some cleanups that we might bring to you all soon, so we could pair that together if this is what you wanted to move forward with. And then the last one, this one's pretty challenging, an alternate calculator for interest rate buydowns. So we have played with this in various ways. We ran the numbers a lot of times to see, what is the best lever that causes the most change. Interest rates are one of the most heavy drivers. Right now, some market rate developers are doing market interest rate buy down programs to get buyers in. However, those are generally, that's not a lever that's pulled until they have houses on the market, they're needing to move them. So it's late in the process. So that might be a challenge to actually implement when we're doing a lock-in at an earlier point. But also it is important to note that Habitat specifically does offer 0% interest rate loans, and our sales price maximums have been a challenge because they do incorporate room for those interest rates, which some do not actually use, specifically Habitat. So we thought about this and tried to play with it. What this would require is there's going to be some ins and outs to sort on implementation, but generally it would be less transparent to have specified calculations for different developments. It would also be late in the process. So I don't know if it would actually be meaningful to a market rate developer. But overall, this would be hard to implement. It would be less transparent to the general public, to developers as they're planning. Well, yeah, I'll just leave it there. challenging, but something it's worth talking about. Okay, so I think the first, if you wanted clarifying questions first, I'm open to that, or if you'd like to answer the immediate question first, let me know what council would like.
I think Matthew, our Councilor Popkin, has a clarifying question.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure I'm fully understanding.
Matthew, can you possibly raise the volume? We can't hear you very well.
Yeah, let me try. Is this better?
Not really.
Interesting.
Okay. Rogelio's going to give it a shot and see. Are you ready, Rogelio? Okay. Go ahead and start speaking.
Let's try that again.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you, Rogelio.
There we go. Thanks for letting me know. When we're talking, I want to make sure I'm understanding how the price maximum works. So, Molly, is this functioning like a price ceiling in economic terms, where we're effectively capping how much we can sell this for?
Yes, that's exactly what it does.
And so, who's eating the difference? If I'm understanding correctly, that it's no longer if we don't make changes, who eats the difference?
So if it's a market rate developer, then they are eating the difference and needing to spread out that I don't want to call it a loss, but it's a financial commitment essentially to the community, and spread that across either their pro forma or depending on how large of a developer they are, other portfolios across the state, region, country. Basically, the inclusionary housing ordinance asks for a developer commitment in this way in order to achieve that community benefit of having affordable housing. If it is a True North style project that comes with subsidy, that subsidy covers the difference.
So in that case, it would be the city eating the additional cost in that situation. And so what they're saying, so if we look at a 3-bedroom, 80% house for 25 is what, 381?
Detached, 381.
What was the 25 number?
So this is the 25 number. The
What was the
24 number was 406. So
406.
about $26,000 difference.
So that 26,000 delta is what we're talking about on that one. And if you get down into the lower price points at 60% AMI, it was 262, and now it's 203. So there's a $60,000 delta that is being either absorbed by the developer or by the city, and that's agnostic of building cost.
Yes.
And that's the big piece in this, because when you look at this, recently I've going into a basic variable of what do we control, or what do we control, what do we not control. What Molly's essentially telling you is that these sales price maximums are being controlled by things that we do not control. So when you think of interest rates, homeowner insurance, and all of these other pieces, the bigger problem starts when you come in and go, well, what does it cost to construct the house? So assuming that construction costs are stable, you're looking at a $30,000 or a $60,000 difference. But if inflationary prices are driving the cost of materials up, then that difference actually starts growing beyond what it is. So even if we had and stayed with the 24 numbers, there still could be a gap that's created because of the inflationary cost with materials and everything else that we're facing.
Specifically sub 80%.
Yeah.
So just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, is the reason that this decreased by about $60,000 or $58,000 between 2024 and 2025, is that because other costs increased, and so
Yes.
the max here
Mhm.
is decreasing and to compensate for that?
Correct. So in essence, a family that earns 80% AMI income, they have 33% of their income. That's a ceiling. And within that, you have to fit back out principal, interest, HOAs, PMI, all of the other ancillary costs that are in there. And by the time you get down there, it's compressing what that sales price can be to keep their housing payment within 33% of their income.
Got it, thank you. And then just very last quick question here. Am I correct in seeing the difference here, like the attached product, so we're thinking townhome versus say detached single family, is this significant, like is $80,000 to $100,000, if not more?
Partially because the HOAs on attached product are so much higher than detached.
I see. Okay, thank you.
To help counsel, we actually ran into this last week. I was talking to Christy. They actually have someone that was in the down payment assistance program that could qualify to buy the house until the HO fees went in. And then as soon as the HO fees went in, they don't qualify to buy the house. So that's what we're.
The ratio got too high.
Yeah, the ratio shifted too high. So that's what we're saying is there are variables out here that no control that start impacting that buying power. And I think what they've talked to me a lot is how do you put that into perspective with, okay, it still costs $400,000 to build the $203,000 home, and next year it could cost $450,000 to build the $203,000 home. So that's the end of the question of who eats it. What Molly's saying is that it would be the city, which then reduces the number of homes that we could potentially build, and or it's the developer. And not to miss the fact that Molly talked about earlier in the presentation that we got very clear on in True North. The lenders are out here too that are saying you have to have a return of this for us to give you the construction loan. And as the market becomes more unstable, the lenders are pressing higher returns because you're not going to get another construction loan. They're literally expecting you to eat out of your return to deal with any inflationary gaps.
Harold, what?
Clear as mud.
Yes, kind of. What determines the cost or of an HOA, the fee? What goes into that, and who decides what that's going to be?
So the things that we know that typically go into HOA fees are landscape management, insurance, both homeowners insurance or the version of it for an attached product, construction defect insurance can play a role. Often that is coming in earlier in the construction financing, but there's still heavy insurance costs on the HOA side as well. Anything else I'm missing? That's typically what's there.
So you're thinking irrigation maintenance, some HOAs do like snow removal, so basically what you're thinking is the operational expenses to deal with the common area in a neighborhood, trees, replacing trees, watering, those types of things. It does change on the attached because now you're insuring, the HOA has to insure the exterior of the townhomes, so that adds to the cost of it. Not necessarily here, but then you know what, people here that have bought houses in metro districts, and that'll show itself at times. And so, but that's generally what's in it.
And I would add to, HOAs are required to have reserves, operating reserves for things like emergencies. And oftentimes as the market tightens up, as lenders get more conservative, they're requiring those reserves to be larger. And that will also drive HOA fees up to make sure that those required reserve amounts are being covered. And then I would also just add on the insurance piece, I think the world has significantly changed since the Marshall Fire, certainly for this region. driving up HOA insurance rates for our county. 100%. It's been affected.
Well, and I think insurance itself, a couple of council members are on our pension funds. And we had a reinsurance fund that we were buying into. For decades, the reinsurance market has been one of the safest markets that you can go into because they were always making money to provide the reinsurance that they give to the large insurance carriers. Natural disasters generally have tapped the insurance carriers. They've also tapped the reinsurance market, which is driving the insurance rates up globally. So even though it may not have happened here, these insurance companies are having to manage their books in terms of what they're carrying. So when you start seeing these natural disasters occurring, it is hitting us. It's just, it's not as pointed, but it is built into their rates. And they're leaving markets. I mean, that's the other challenge that we're seeing, is insurance companies are leaving certain markets.
Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Could you go to it was basically one of the last slides where it's all 7 of the options, right, in one list? Thank you. So I think that I'm just going to kick it off here. I don't really have any questions. So I think we do need to possibly look at some programmatic issues, right? I'll tell you, first of all, the alternate calculator for interest rate buydowns is not a go for me because of the complexity as well as the transparency issues there. I think both of those things combined is probably not necessarily the optimal way to go. I'm not necessarily ruling anything out at this point, but that would not be preferred for me. Further reduce IH requirement for attainable housing. I don't think that gets us necessarily to where we want because I feel like this is affecting housing at the much more, the below 100% AMI, more so than it is the middle tier or attainable housing. I think obviously locking in the requirement at recording of entitlements instead of certificate of occupancy can leave buyers in the lurch a little bit. So I think that kind of goes against some of the things that we're trying to accomplish with our program. So that leaves the other two is programmatically update all data sources annually instead of some every 3 years. If it's feasible to do that, I think that's better, provides softer landing points and more certainty in certain ways because we don't necessarily know on a 3-year time frame what's going to happen, much less, we don't really know what's going to happen in general, especially right now. It's very turbulent times. And then I think being in alignment with our housing needs assessment and Prop 123 is probably not a bad idea. So for 6, I'd be in favor of possibly raising to 100%. Again, these are just based solely off of kind of this limited dive into it. And then on the big question, because we're considering programmatic changes, I would prefer that we hold steady at 2024. So that would be my preferred direction. Thank you.
Okay, I heard a yes to 1, 3, and 6.
Would it be inappropriate? I would kind of like to see what Dave Emerson has to say about these 7 options and which ones, because he is the one who builds the most for sale units. Which one of these options would really hinder what you need to do to the point where you wouldn't be able to operate?
2.
2? Number 2?
Yeah. So I do think there's a lot of assumptions in these sales prices and a lot of room for interpretation, which is why I do think you have to look at what those numbers are. Are we getting, if we are setting maximums, just by way of example, and it's a true deed restriction, we should be getting tax assessments that are consistent with that. And there's assumptions that we're not potentially getting that. within the calculator, so that affects the property taxes. So I think what's clear to me is it is complicated, and we're trying to keep it simpler. And what I'm asking for is to continue to work with the staff, because I really would like to get into some of those assumptions. It is not just our 0% interest that is creating the difference. You know, and there are no easy answers. I don't want to suggest that, but to me, the clearest thing is to spend some time and keep things the way they are. But going to 2025 would be a real problem. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And to Molly and Harold, when is the timeline? Is there a reason that we need to make this decision now?
Yes, at least on number 1 and 2.
Okay.
Because usually we put these out in June. We're
Right.
here in the beginning of August, and we have projects that are waiting. So they want to know at least number 1 and 2.
Okay.
For 3 through 7, these would require, not 3 so much, but 4 and beyond. Those would require code amendments, so we'd have to bring back an ordinance and prepare that for you.
It's really the ordinance that we have to bring it back at this point for council to make the decision.
Okay.
And, I mean, I think what we're all saying is the market is so chaotic right now.
Mm-hmm.
And if you two disagree with me, jump in, but I think what's behind this is the market is so chaotic that I think holding at 24, evaluating these options collectively with folks is probably the safest place to be at this point, because there's so many things shifting on us daily that we can't definitively give you a good answer to some of these questions. I mean, Molly, Christy, do you?
Right. We would want to do some research as we prepare an ordinance for sure.
Okay. Then I would suggest 1, 3, and 6. You did say that reducing the IH requirement for attainable housing wouldn't make any difference to the developer. Did I understand that correctly?
It wouldn't change the sales price maximums. It's
Okay.
just
Okay.
what if there's another different type of program tool that can help further incent the provision of units.
Okay.
But it would incent provision of middle tier units.
Okay. Councilor Christ.
Thank you for making this very understandable. Okay, so I'm in favor of 1.
What do you want?
I'm also, you and I both attended the middle housing presentation right before CML. And you know, it kept coming up over and over again with the financial types about that the data is never contemporary, 2-year lag time, what have you. So I think number 3 is a good option. I think we need to update our information more actively. No on 4. I would consider 5. And I would consider 6, but I would like to know more about that. I think there might be some unintended consequences with 6. And then just as a comment about 7, I do believe interest rates will come down in 6 to 8 months. At least that's what I read continually on the business news.
You know, one of the things I think that we are seeing on True North is, I think if you hold steady on your sales price maximums, that could theoretically create an incentive for developers to buy down the interest rate, which actually lets you achieve it, but you're not building it into the process. Because if you're pushing their margins down by increasing the sales prices, then it almost doesn't let them have the option to buy down interest rates. And I know that Walker's working through that, but I think that would change the equation. So holding to those maximums may create an incentive to have people consider buying interest rates down, which ultimately benefits the buyer of the home, the first buyer.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm against 7. I just wanted to make a comment about it.
Councillor Popkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I too agree with number 1 and 3 in concept here. I wanted to ask one more question, which is, how many of these are treating the actual cause of the problem, or are these treating symptoms of it?
I wouldn't say that it's treating the problem. It's more trying to move with the problem and reflect buying power in a changing market. In essence, we, as a policy choice that council could make, and what I should say, the policy choice that council has made to date since IH came out, is it's focusing on the buyer. We want to provide these units, and we want it to be affordable to these buyers. That's why this calculator does not take into account things like cost of construction. But in a market like this, where both are constrained, you just don't get units. That's just what happens. And also it shows that an eligible home buyer is really not out there until you're past 100% AMI, unless the city does other types of subsidy programs, or the state, or other resources out there. So I think the problem today is that we have a tool that is good for reflecting buying power, but there isn't necessarily the perfect solution that solves both the buyer's problem and the developer's problem altogether, because we have so many factors that are out of our control. So it's more trying to make adjustments to make as much balance as we can to both benefit buyers, but also actually get something from a developer, or you make a policy choice that swings it one way or the other.
Seeing no one else in the queue, do you have your direction?
So I think it's clear on number 1.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've got number 3 sounds okay. We have a no on 4 and 5, with 1 maybe on 5. Does this sound correct?
Mm-hmm.
No on 7. What was the
Yeah.
consensus on 6?
Interested in learning more about 6.
Learning more. Okay. Okay. I think we have our direction then.
Okay.
Anything else?
It's very complicated.
It really is.
Yeah, and I think for perspective, when we went to CML, some of you all were on the housing conversation. I mean, there's a city that their inclusionary housing requirement was what, $240,000 per unit. And so everybody's kind of tackling this in different ways, but I think that's a different beast altogether. So to the point that Councilmember Popkin asked, what's the problem? Interest rates, construction, materials of just material cost, labor. I mean, all of these things that's inherently the problem. And I think the model works in normal conditions. We've been in anything but normal conditions. And that's what tends to break models, is the abnormal conditions.
Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine.
Just one more point on item number 6 is that, so we have our housing needs assessment, which was finalized in 2023. We're going to be undertaking the process of updating that to conform with new state requirements that came out of Senate Bill 24-174, which has very specific rules for what needs to be in housing needs assessments that came out of DOLA. So we're going to be updating that housing needs assessment over the next year. And I think that also that process will better inform this decision of potentially defining capital A affordable for sale at 100% AMI. So I think it's good timing with that process. And lastly, I did just want to publicly acknowledge Katie Silvis couldn't be here tonight. She's out sick, but she did a lot of the data crunching with MLS data to do spreadsheets on spreadsheets on spreadsheets to get us to this point where we feel really comfortable with our data and recommendations. She's our home ownership specialist on the team, and she would normally be here, but she's out with a medical issue, so I just wanted to acknowledge her.
Well, thank her for us.
Hey Molly, real quick, not to take any, do we have an update on True North for the council in terms of how many people have come in? How many are moving through the application process? Are we still seeing that 50-ish% people that aren't qualifying?
I don't know. Katie would know the numbers because she's
Okay.
doing the eligibility, but I know that we're getting a good number of folks pre-qualified from Elevations Credit Union, and we are processing the first batch of eligibility for city employees, and the goal is to start site selection on August 18th, which is driving the need to make this decision tonight because they need to know which sales prices to lock in to start drafting contracts. But we can certainly get you updated number on the number of applications. But for the past 4 weeks, certainly, I would say Katie's been just focusing on income eligibility. So we're processing dozens of folks at this point for phase one.
I think my point is, what's in my mind is, even though the houses are as low as we've seen for new construction, or toward that area, in the example I gave you on somebody who qualifies for down payment assistance, we're still seeing people that aren't qualifying. And when I think of True North, and I think of the bonus points and live here, retired here, those types of things, the data set that I'm going to be really interested in is how many people aren't qualifying for this price point, because that's our first real data set to really show what we can do. The needs assessment, and it's good data, but this is granular data that's showing how many people aren't able to buy homes. And I think that's what we're seeing driving the need for other housing, is the fact that there's just nothing there. And so that's the data set that I'm going to be really keen on.
Katie is watching. Okay, over 1,000 households are on the interest list. Well over 200 are able to carry a mortgage. Going through the preference and mortgage applications now for the first 54 homes. So far, 8 are eligible, 12 are left next up in the queue, and then everybody else, we're just lining them up and pushing them through that eligibility review.
And I'm glad you brought that up, Harold, because you mentioned the construction side and their challenges, but this is what I sometimes don't think, that residents who come and tell us that we just need to drop our fees, and it's the income to debt ratio that the individual buyer has to be able to qualify for.
Yeah, so I think
It's
on the fee piece, I think the highest fees that we had on any one house was $30,000. We waived all of those, and even doing that, we were white knuckling it on because of all of these other cost pressures that we were seeing.
Right.
And the offset of that is impacting other revenue streams as well,
Right.
which then starts flowing into rates
Mm-hmm.
as we think about it. So we're balancing multiple variables in some of these equations, because the money's got to come from somewhere.
Exactly. Thank you very much. This was really,
Thank you.
I love your presentations because they're so informative. I mean, you really know what you're talking about, and it's hard to the council sometimes to understand all the nuances, and so thank you very much for all your work.
I will refrain from showing you the spreadsheet.
No, don't do that.
It's very large.
Thank you. Well, we are done with our study session items, so now we're at mayor and council comments. Do any councilors have? No, not at study sessions. Besides, Lance isn't here, so. So, any comments?
Oh, nope, Mr. Popkin.
Oh, Mr. Popkin, Councilor Popkin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just very briefly, just wanted to thank council for being flexible with the virtual attendance for a couple meetings. This is the third and final of the ones I asked about post-appointment, knowing that I had professional commitments. So thank you very much. Sorry for a couple of the internet connectivity issues today. I'm not on Nextlight, so I couldn't promise that it would be a well-connected system inherently, even though I'm at a large hotel in Chicago.
How many stories is that hotel?
I don't know, I'm on floor 24.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah.
But you'd be impressed at how little traffic, vehicle traffic is actually in the streets. So design really matters of infrastructure and transportation options, and even when
Thank
you have
you,
a
thank you. That's really important to me. Oh, my goodness. City manager comments. City attorney. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you, bye.